Chapter 10:13. After Hua Xingzuan's birthday celebration ended, Chu Xiu followed Pak Donglai to the island where Tianyishui Hall was located, and met the people that he had roped in. The leader of the Stormy Waves Alliance, Ko Shentong, was a straightforward man. He wasn't as scheming as Hua Xingzuan. He wanted to overthrow the Supreme Island purely because he couldn't stand the grudges of the past. Similarly, Chu Xiu also met Long Tianying of the Cetacean Society here. Long Tianying was so touched when he saw Chu Xiu that he almost teared up. Of course, Long Tianying had only met Chu Xiu once, and they weren't close. He wasn't moved to tears because he saw Chu Xiu, but because he thought of Master Tam Yuan. Master Tam Yuan had given Long Tianying and the entire Cetacean Society a new lease on life. In the end, Master Tam Yuan passed away, and the Hua family simply slaughtered him like a pig or a sheep. Although Long Tianying had some power under him, he wasn't even a warrior compared to Pak Donglai's Tianyishui Hall. He was just a businessman, and he didn't even dare to resist. Long Tianying was reminded of Master Tam Yuan again when he saw Chu Xiu. He said with a sobbing tone, "I didn't expect to see official Chu again today. If I had known, I wouldn't have returned to the East Sea. I would have stayed and guarded Master Tam Yuan's tomb for the rest of my life. It's better than living in fear overseas." Of course, Long Tianying was just joking. He had worked hard overseas for his entire life to build a top merchant association like the Cetacean Society. How could he give up so easily? Chu Xiu patted his shoulder and said, "President Long, you don't have to be so sad. I'm here today, and the Hua family's tyrannical days are coming to an end. By then, the Cetacean Society will still be the biggest merchant association overseas." Chu Xiu didn't mind helping Long Tianying. Of course, Master Tam Yuan was also one of the reasons. Chu Xiu rarely owed anyone anything ever since he stepped into the martial world. And there were only a few elders who truly helped him. Old Man Wei was one of them. Master Tam Yuan was also one of them. Master Tam Yuan had given all his inheritance to Chu Xiu. Although Chu Xiu had cheated him out of it, he still owed Master Tam Yuan a big favor. Chu Xiu didn't like monks, but Master Tam Yuan was a true holy monk, the kind that people truly admired. Unfortunately, good people didn't live long in this world. Chu Kuanga was a good person, a hero, and a great warrior, but he died in the prime of his life. Master Tam Yuan was a good person, a holy monk, but he died just as he stepped into the true fire spirit refinement realm. On the other hand, Hua Xingzuan allowed his useless descendants to dominate the East Sea. Although they didn't do anything evil, they weren't good people either. In the end, he lived longer than anyone else. Chu Xiu didn't want to die so early, so it was better to leave the job of being a hero to someone else. In the secret room, Pak Donglai said, "With the addition of official Chu, the chances of us destroying Supreme Island will increase greatly. We should also plan how we should do it." Yi Buoxuan said in disdain, "What's the point of planning? Official Chu and I will help you take care of Hua Xingzuan's 3 adopted sons. You have 2 true fire spirit refinement realm martial artists left. Do you think you can't take care of a dying old man like Hua Xingzuan? As for the others, Tianyishui Hall and the Stormy Waves Alliance have so many people. Can't you deal with them?" Pak Donglai smiled bitterly. "Master Yi, you're not from the East Sea, so you don't know how strong Supreme Island's foundation is after dominating the East Sea for over 100 years. Let's talk about Supreme Island first. Did you notice anything strange when you went there? But in reality, it's said that the entire Supreme Island is a huge machine forged by an ancient blacksmith master. It has endless power. No one knows if this is true or not, but I've sent people to check the history of Supreme Island. Before Hua Xingzuan appeared, there were indeed no islands in the sea. So there's definitely something wrong with Supreme Island. There's also Hua Xingzuan's eldest adopted son, Qiu Tianya. Some people even said that he had reached the heaven and earth elemental state. Although he's gone missing, according to the information I've gathered, Qiu Tianya gave Hua Xingzuan something before he left. It might be a trump card, something that can at least protect Supreme Island. And don't forget the name of Hua Xingzuan, God's Eye. Everyone knows that Hua Xingzuan has 5 adopted sons. Why don't you know that he doesn't have a 6th? I got this information from a drunk Hua family disciple. He said that Hua Xingzuan seems to have another adopted son, but he rarely appears in front of everyone. He only guards in the dark. Even if Hua Xingzuan has been pampered for so many years, he also has the cultivation of true fire god refinement state. Does he need a real pellet state martial artist to guard him? So, it's obvious how strong the person guarding him is. Yibuoxuan frowned slightly and said, "Then what's your previous plan?" Pak Donglai waved his hand and said, "Sow discord. Among the 3 adopted sons of Hua Xingzuan, Nailan Hai is closer to Bailey Pobing, but the most powerful one is Fu Longxiao. Fu Longxiao's Blue Dragon fleet travels between the Windbreaker Sea and the Windbreaker Sea. He has a strong background and can bring a lot of benefits to Hua Xingzuan, so he is also the most favored by Hua Xingzuan. But because of this, his attitude towards Bailey Pobing and Nailan Hai is also quite arrogant, which made the 2 very unhappy. So my plan is to send someone to infiltrate the Blue Dragon fleet and become Fu Longxiao's confidant. Then find an opportunity to sow discord between them. When they turn hostile, I'll kill them in one fell swoop." After that, Pak Donglai looked at Chu Xiu and said, "What does official Chu think of this plan?" Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Not bad. Sometimes the biggest weakness of a person is not their appearance, but their heart. But I don't have time to waste here. If I delay any longer, I'm afraid that the Northern Yan fleet will be destroyed by Eastern Qi." Pak Donglai smiled and said, "I almost forgot. Official Chu is very experienced in this kind of thing. I wonder if Official Chu has any good ideas?" Towards Chu Xiu's attitude, Pak Donglai wasn't angry. He wasn't at the level of Hua Xingzuan, who was used to being in a high position and couldn't tolerate being refuted. Moreover, he had a detailed understanding of Chu Xiu's information. In the Central Plains, Chu Xiu had destroyed countless families and clans. He was indeed very experienced in this kind of thing. Chu Xiu knocked on the table and said, "This seems very simple to me. Nailan Hai and the others live in different places. We just need to go to them one by one, kill them one by one, and then attack Supreme Island." Pak Donglai was dumbfounded and said, "That's it." Chu Xiu nodded and said, "That's it. But what if we make any movements and arouse the suspicion of others? What should we do then?" Chu Xiu asked, "Your Tianyishui Hall is so big. You should have a formation master. You should be able to set up a formation that can temporarily seal off the aura of a small island, right?" Pak Donglai was stunned and said, "Yes, but..." Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "No buts. I'll do it for you. What you need to do is to set up the formation around us while I'm killing people. Just don't let the waves spread out. It doesn't have to take too long, 15 minutes will be enough. Oh yes, I'll pretend to leave the Qingfeng Ocean with Master Yi tomorrow. You can come and pick us up after we sail to an uninhabited sea area." Actually, in Chu Xiu's opinion, it was too easy to kill people silently in the East Sea's terrain. Everyone lived on different islands, and they were easily hundreds or even thousands of miles apart. It would take half a day to travel back and forth by boat. This was simply a natural barrier. After hearing Chu Xiu's plan, Pak Donglai was still a little hesitant, but he still nodded and agreed. He had not seen Chu Xiu's real means, but he still chose to believe the description of Chu Xiu in the information. Chu Xiu was able to rise up in the Central Plains, a place that was countless times crueler than overseas, so he was definitely not an impulsive and brainless person. The next day, Chu Xiu directly boarded a ship with Yibuoxuan to return to the South Sea. This scene was seen by many people. If Chu Xiu was said to not be famous in the Qingfeng Ocean before, then after he rejected Hua Xingzuan's request to be adopted as his son, almost everyone in the Qingfeng Ocean recognized Chu Xiu. After all, in so many years, Chu Xiu was the first person to reject Hua Xingzuan's offer. Moreover, most people felt that Chu Xiu did not know how to appreciate favors. Although Chu Xiu was in the true fire spirit refinement realm, and was an important figure in the Central Plains warriors, which one of the people who were adopted by the fifth Lord Hua was not in the true fire spirit refinement realm? Which one of them was not an important figure? However, they neglected the fact that when these people were adopted by Hua Xingzuan, they did not have the strength and status that Chu Xiu had now. At this time, on Haotian Island, Hua Xingzuan was slowly sipping a cup of specially made spiritual tea. This spiritual tea was filled with vitality. If the ingredients were used to refine pills, It could be used to refine 8th grade pills. However, he was drinking it like tea here. Has Chu Xiu left the Qingfeng Ocean? Hua Xingzuan asked. One of his direct descendants was serving by his side. When he heard that, he hurriedly said, "That unappreciative fellow has already left. The old ancestor has taken him in as his adopted son and given him so much face. Yet he still doesn't know how to appreciate favors. What a joke. Without the old ancestor's permission, who in the entire Qingfeng Ocean would dare to help him? If he doesn't scram back to the central plains with his tail between his legs, staying here is just a waste of time." Hua Xingzuan narrowed his eyes and said calmly, "Everyone has their own aspirations. If he is not willing, we can't force him, right?" Although Hua Xingzuan said that, he was still a little unhappy with Chu Xiu's rejection. All these years, no one had ever rejected him like this. Rejected his good intentions. However, Hua Xingzuan was not too angry. How many more years could he live? Since Chu Xiu had rejected him, then his future achievements had nothing to do with him. However, at this time, in the uninhabited waters of the Qingfeng Ocean, Chu Xiu was already sitting on Tian Yishui Hall's ship. He stood at the bow of the ship and muttered, "It's time to kill." Chapter 10:14. Chu Xiu's first target was the nameless island where Naylan Hai was. Although Chu Xiu said that he only needed to kill people on the island, Pak Donglai still gave Chu Xiu a lot of information about Naylan Hai to be on the safe side. Although Chu Xiu thought that he didn't need to prepare so much to kill a cripple, he still looked through the information out of curiosity. After looking through it, Chu Xiu only had one comment about Naylan Hai. His heart was higher than the sky, but his life was thinner than paper. This person was considered relatively young among Hua Xingzuan's godson. Moreover, when he was adopted by Hua Xingzuan, he was only a child. Therefore, his actual age was even younger than Zhao Yuanfeng. At such a young age, he was adopted by Hua Xingzuan. In addition, his talent was also exceptionally good. Therefore, this had led to his arrogant and condescending personality. Apart from Hua Xingzuan's eldest adopted son, Xiu Tianya, and Bailey Pobing, who often took care of him when he was young, he did not put anyone in his eyes. Even if it was Hua Xingzuan's son who offended him, he would still beat him up without hesitation. This caused him to have a conflict with Kong Dongming in the future. Although he knew that he wasn't a match for Kong Dongming, he still pestered him. In the end, Kong Dongming killed him and crippled his legs. From then on, Na Lanhai's character became gloomy, violent, and incomparably eccentric. There used to be some servants on his nameless island. However, the number of servants dwindled, and they all ran away after being scolded and beaten by him. 2 days ago, when he returned from Supreme Island, the last few servants also ran away after being scolded by him. The reason why he was angry was none other than Chu Xiu. He was jealous of Chu Xiu. Back then he was just like Chu Xiu. At such a young age he already had the strength of true fire spirit refinement state, and could stand shoulder to shoulder with the older generation. Moreover, he had Hua Xingzuan as his godfather, who in the entire breezy ocean dared to challenge him. However, ever since he was crippled by Kong Dongming, he felt that everything had changed. His godfather no longer valued him, and Fu Longxiao even looked at him with disdain. And that Zhao Yuanfeng, the guy who came later, even dared to hire Kong Dongming as a guest, which was simply not putting him in his eyes. Back then, he had even brought this matter to Hua Xingzuan, but all he got in return was a sentence from his godfather saying that they should be brothers. Naylan Hai had lost his composure when a person who was extremely arrogant ended up like this. Especially at a time like this, when he saw Chu Xiu, who was just as young and equally powerful, it made him feel even more upset. If his legs were not crippled, he would be the East Sea's Chu Xiu. That was why he had targeted Chu Xiu during the birthday celebration. Other than suspicion, there was also jealousy in it. At this moment, soft footsteps were heard from outside. Naylan Hai roared, "Get lost. All of you get out. I'll break all your legs if you don't get lost. You were the one who lost your legs, and now you're trying to break others' legs, forcing your pain onto others. Do you think that makes you feel better?" Hearing this voice, Naylan Hai's expression immediately changed. His body moved, and he hovered in midair. His gaze towards Chu Xiu was filled with shock. He had clearly left, so why was he still here? At this time, Nayland Hai also noticed the movement around him. Something was wrong. There was not a single movement around the entire island, and even the sound of the waves had been muffled. Nayland Hai's legs were indeed crippled, but he had experienced countless battles in his early years. At this moment, he understood what Chu Xiu was going to do. Chu Xiu, how dare you? Chu Xiu only sneered. The next moment, Buddha's light shone around him, and the Dharma form of the Mahavirokana seal appeared behind him. The Buddha's seal fell, and its power was like a landslide. Nayland Hai's legs were only crippled, which affected part of his combat power. However, his cultivation was still there. At this moment, Nayland Hai formed a seal with his hand, and the endless water vapor around him condensed into a monstrous wave in front of him. It was like a tsunami crashing against the Buddha's seal. But the next moment, the powerful and heavy Buddha's seal completely shattered it. Nayland Hai's figure was blasted into the ground, and the powerful force shook his meridians, causing his face to turn pale. Chu Xiu stepped out, and the Dharma form of the Mahavirokana seal behind him was majestic and sacred, but the Buddha's seal in his hand fell mercilessly again. Nayland Hai roared angrily, and countless blood mists burst out from the pores of his body, fusing with the water vapor, and turned into countless blood spears that blasted towards Chu Xiu. However, they were still forcibly smashed by the seal. Nayland Hai spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face was as pale as paper. His eyes were full of horror and disbelief. Being overseas, Nayland Hai's knowledge was actually not as good as that of the warriors in the Central Plains. After all, the number of strong warriors overseas was limited, and the area was also limited. Therefore, the strongest person Nayland Hai had ever seen in his life was Kong Dongming, who had crippled his legs. And now, he finally saw another person, a person like Kong Dongming, who he did not even have the confidence to resist. The Buddha's seal fell for the third time, and this time, Chu Xiu formed the colorless sealing palm seal. The power of this seal distorted the universe, and strangled everything. Nayland Hai could not withstand this seal, and was immediately sent flying while vomiting blood. At this moment, a halberd appeared in Chu Xiu's hand, and he displayed the great E-halberd technique. The halberd seemed to be able to shatter mountains and split rivers, and that overbearing power had instantly torn apart Nayland Hai's protective Jin Qi, penetrated his chest, and directly nailed him to the ground. This halberd was not a divine weapon. The Heavenly Way war case was severely damaged and could no longer change its form. However, even an ordinary precious weapon could still kill people. And even without a weapon, Chu Xiu only used a weapon to confuse people. This halberd had completely torn apart Nayland Hai's heart. Chu Xiu slowly walked in front of Nayland Hai, and expressionlessly pulled out the halberd. In an instant, Nayland Hai's life force fell to the extreme. Before he died, Nayland Hai pointed at Chu Xiu, but before he could say his last words, his life force completely dissipated. He still had a lot of questions, such as why did Chu Xiu return after leaving, and why did he come to kill him again? Unfortunately, he was destined to never get the answers to these questions. Chu Xiu was also not interested in explaining so much to a dead person. Looking at Nayland Hai's corpse, Chu Xiu turned around and left. At this moment, outside of Nayland Hai's nameless island, a small boat was parked there. However, from the outside they could not see the boat. Countless formations were carved on the boat, and there were even a few formation masters setting up formations below the cabin, hiding the movements on the island from the outside world. On the small boat, Pak Donglai seemed rather nervous. He had been planning to attack Supreme Island for 8 to 10 years, and not just a day or two. Now that the plan had finally started, the steps were completely different from what he had imagined. It was no wonder that he was nervous. However, Pak Donglai suppressed his anxiety and took out a chessboard. He said to Yi Buoxuan, "Master Yi, there's no point in just waiting. Why don't we play a game?" Yi Buoxuan shook his head and said, "No thanks. There's not enough time." Pak Donglai was taken aback. "Don't worry, Master Yi. My chess skills are not that bad. I'm not saying that the game will end too quickly. I'm just saying that official Chu will probably be done by the time we start it. It can't be that fast, right?" Pak Donglai was still in disbelief. Previously, he wanted to go in with Chu Xiu to attack Nayland Hai. However, Chu Xiu said that there was no need for that. The more people there were, the easier it would be to leave traces. Pak Donglai definitely believed that Chu Xiu could win. However, he couldn't believe that Chu Xiu could kill Nalan Hai so quickly. Even if Nalan Hai's legs were crippled, he was still a true spiritual refinement state cultivator. Just as he was still in doubt, Chu Xiu had already landed on the boat. Pak Donglai was shocked. Ibuoxuan shrugged and said, "I told you that there's definitely not enough time. Official Chu has already taken care of that side." Pak Donglai was still in shock. Chu Xiu said faintly, "He's a cripple. If I'm any slower, then I'll be a real cripple." "Alright, he's already dead. Go back and wait for news. When Bailey Pobbing is lured out, then we'll take care of him." Chu Xiu's idea was not to swarm in and kill randomly. Instead, he wanted to kill them one by one. Nalan Hai was the easiest to kill because there was no one else on the entire island except for him. And Bailey Pobbing still had Divine Weapon Island. Although there weren't many people on Divine Weapon Island, there were still many elites who belonged to Bailey Pobbing. If one of them escaped, it would be easy for someone to leak the news. Therefore, Chu Xiu killed Nalan Hai first. Then he would find a way to lure out Bailey Pobbing and finally take care of him. Pak Donglai rubbed his chin, but he still couldn't hide the shock in his heart. After all, Nalan Hai was one of the top experts in the overseas region. In the end, he was squashed to death by Chu Xiu like a chicken. This was already terrifying enough. Of course, the most terrifying thing was that even though Chu Xiu had such power, he was forced by the righteous path of the Central Plains warriors to come to the overseas region to seek reinforcements. One could imagine how deep the waters of the Central Plains were. The boat quietly sailed away. 2 days later, Nalan Hai's corpse was discovered. After all, Nalan Hai was Hua Xingzuan's adopted son. Hearing that he was angry again and chased away the servants, Hua Xingzuan could only send a few disciples of the Hua family to take a look. In the end, they actually brought back Nalan Hai's corpse. When the news of Nalan Hai's death spread, the entire Hua Xingzuan's forces were in an uproar. Everyone hurried over to see what was going on. For so many years, no one had ever dared to provoke the Supreme Island. When Hua Xingzuan saw Nalan Hai's corpse, his first reaction wasn't sadness, but panic. Chapter 10:15. Hua Xingzuan was indeed panicking, because the peace he had maintained for so long had been shattered. Ever since he took in these godson, or to be more precise, ever since he obtained the pair of God's eyes, everything had been smooth sailing for him. For so many years he had never suffered a loss. He relied on these foster sons to support his current situation of dominating the Clear Wind Sea region. Hua Xingzuan panicked in the face of such a sudden situation. His usual calm and unperturbed appearance was gone. He even kept pacing around Nalan Hai's corpse, his mouth constantly muttering, "Who the hell is it? Who dared to kill the fourth prince?" Even Bailey Pobbing frowned when he saw Hua Xingzuan's reaction. He coughed and said, "Don't panic, Godfather. We don't have to be afraid of anyone, as long as it's not a heaven and earth abstruse realm powerhouse." Bailey Pobbing felt a little sad, because he had always had a good relationship with Nalan Hai. Among Hua Xingzuan's godson, he immediately took in Fu Longxiao and Nalan Hai as his godson after taking in Bailey Pobbing. When Nalan Hai was young, Bailey Pobbing even gave him pointers on martial arts for a period of time. The two were like teachers and friends. Thus, after Nalan Hai was unable to recover from his setback, he was always gloomy towards him. However, Nalan Hai's attitude towards Bailey Pobbing did not change at all. Hua Xingzuan patted Bailey Pobbing and said, "I'll leave this place to you then. I know that you have a good relationship with the fourth prince. You have to find the murderer as soon as possible and avenge the fourth prince." Bailey Pobbing nodded and began to examine Nalan Hai's corpse. He was not Hua Xingzuan, who lived a comfortable life. Instead, he had climbed all the way here, so he was very familiar with these things. Fu Longxiao also came to help. Although he didn't have a good relationship with Nalan Hai and Bailey Pobbing, he couldn't care less about scheming at this time. He followed Bailey Pobbing to examine Nalan Hai's body. After a long while, Bailey Pobbing said with a solemn expression, "The person who attacked is very strong. He practically crushed everything in his path. The fourth prince even started to burn his blood essence, but he still couldn't stop him." Fu Longxiao also said, looking at the wound, the fourth prince should have died under a weapon like halberd. Combined with the opponent's strength, the person who attacked should be at the peak of the true fire spirit refinement realm. Bailey Pobbing frowned and said, but I didn't detect any kind of vital energy from the fourth prince's body. In the Qingfeng region, who would use halberd as a weapon? Fu Longxiao shook his head and said, among the contemporary martial artists, there are some martial artists from the Central Plains who use halberd as a weapon, especially the generals from the Central Plains who come from the military. A weapon like halberd is definitely a fierce weapon in battle, but in our overseas region, there are still many people who use sabers and swords. Even if there are martial artists who use halberd as a weapon, their strength is definitely not at the true fire spirit refinement realm. Bailey Pobbing suddenly said, what about the Feng-splitting sea? Fu Longxiao thought for a moment and said, there is an expert living in seclusion in the depths of the Feng-splitting sea who uses halberd. But the opponent cultivates black flame gang energy. This kind of gang energy is hot and overbearing. Once he attacks, it is easy to leave traces. But there is no trace of gang energy left on the fourth prince's body. Most importantly, why did he kill the fourth prince? What's the motive? Bailey Pobbing rubbed his head, feeling a headache coming on. He was also puzzled about the motive. He couldn't figure out why someone would want to kill a guy like Naylan Hai, who was already crippled. As for whether Naylan Hai had offended people over the years, there were really many. But he was already living in seclusion on a small island, and the people he really offended were not the big shots with power and influence. They were just some servants who served him. It couldn't be those people who did it, right? At this moment, Hua Xingzuan, who had been watching silently from the side, suddenly said, do you guys think it could be Chu Xiu who did it? Fu Longxiao and Bailey Pobbing looked at each other at the same time and shook their heads. Bailey Pobbing said, it shouldn't be possible. I've looked into it before. Chu Xiu has long left the Eastern Sea, and according to Chu Xiu's information, this person is skilled in saber techniques. There is even a record of him forcing the abbot of the Great Light Temple, the Heaven and Earth Elemental Enlightenment Realm expert, Su Ci, to retreat with a single saber strike. Although Chu Xiu had used the Black Tortoise True technique outside, he had only used it a few times. It was impossible for the overseas region to have such detailed information. Even in the wind-sweeping tower, one had to look through the most detailed information in order to be mentioned. Fu Longxiao also said, that's right. It doesn't seem like Chu Xiu's doing, because he has no reason to do so. Chu Xiu came to the Eastern Sea to look for reinforcements. So what if he killed the fourth prince? Does he think we'll help him just because one of us died? If it's to vent his anger. Speaking up to this point, Fu Longxiao secretly glanced at Hua Xingzuan and said, if it's to vent his anger, he doesn't have to kill the fourth prince. Godfather, many of your direct descendants are in the outside world. Hearing this, some of the direct descendants of the Hua family felt a chill in their hearts. Previously, they were bold enough to do whatever they wanted in the outside world, because they were confident that the Hua family and Sovereign Island could protect them. But now that they saw a dead person, they realized that not everyone was afraid of their backing. They even wanted to go out and call their children back. It was too dangerous outside. Sovereign Island was safer. The two searched for a while, but they couldn't find anything. They had no choice but to seal Naylan Hai's body. Bailey Pobbing said solemnly, Godfather, during this period of time, recall the Hua family's people. We don't know if the fourth prince died because he offended someone, or if someone is targeting Sovereign Island. He turned to Fu Longxiao and said, Third brother, don't think about running to the wind-splitting ocean for now. Mobilize your Blue Dragon fleet to look for clues. Fu Longxiao humphed. Do I need you to tell me that? After giving the orders, Bailey Pobbing and Fu Longxiao both left. They were going to gather people and look for clues. He didn't believe that no one in that area of the sea had heard the slightest bit of movement when he had killed someone so brazenly. Hua Xingzuan watched the two leave. He wanted to say something, but he couldn't say a single word. He didn't know why, but he always had a feeling of unease. Of course, he wasn't the only one who felt it. Bailey Pobbing felt it too. He seemed to have vaguely sensed something, but he couldn't figure out what it was. Driving his ship, Bailey Pobbing returned to Divine Armament Island. Although Bailey Pobbing wasn't good at managing his own forces, he had quite a number of subordinates. Sending them out would be of some use. At that moment, a huge wave suddenly rose on the surface of the ocean. The wave was extremely terrifying. Like a tsunami, it completely capsized Bailey Pobbing's ship in an instant. Bailey Pobbing fell into the water, but the stellar chi around him had already separated the endless seawater. At that moment, Bailey Pobbing suddenly realized something was wrong. His ship was refined using a blacksmithing technique. 80% of the ship was made of metal, and it was also inscribed with countless arrays. It wouldn't be a problem for it to sail through the Windbreaker Sea. Most of the sea in the Windbreaker Sea was calm. How could there be such a huge wave that even capsized his ship? Bailey Pobbing walked on the water, and his figure rose to the surface. At that moment, his expression suddenly changed. The area within a radius of more than 10 miles had been completely separated by countless water walls. It was like a prison. Even an idiot could guess that he had fallen into an ambush. At that moment, a crack appeared on the water wall. Chushio walked out of it and walked on the water. Bailey Pobbing instantly understood everything the moment he saw Chushio. But he didn't expect this person to be Chushio. Chushio, it's you. Why did you kill the fourth prince? Why did you become enemies with the Venerable Island? Just because we didn't agree to work with you? Just because Godfather wanted to take you in as his godson? Bailey Pobbing understood, but he was confused because it didn't make sense. Chushio couldn't possibly be so narrow-minded that he would kill someone over such a small conflict, right? You really want to know? Bailey Pobbing nodded with a gloomy expression. Go to hell and think about it with your fourth brother. As Chushio's voice fell, in the next moment, the scorching true fire of inner energy around him burned, and there was even a black world annihilation fire mixed within it. As the punch landed, a thunderous explosion rang out in the surroundings. The punch suppressed the heavens and earth, and crushed the mountains and rivers. Bailey Pobbing roared angrily. Dazzling white astral energy wrapped around his body like a sharp blade. He didn't have a weapon, but his entire body was filled with weapons. The two fists collided. In that instant, a powerful shockwave rippled outwards. With the two of them as the center, an endless whirlpool of waves exploded. The water droplets at the center were even torn into tiny mist. Bailey Pobbing's expression changed. Just like that day at Hua Xingzuan's birthday banquet, he couldn't withstand the power of Chushio's punch. He retreated. The armor on his arm was torn, and Bailey Pobbing's face was pale. However, Chushio was expressionless as he smashed his fist down again. This time it was in extreme strength. One punch after another, Bailey Pobbing's armor, which was comparable to a divine weapon, was completely shattered. He was even vomiting blood from Chushio's punches. With a furious roar, the chi and blood around Bailey Pobbing roared. He controlled the power of heaven and earth around him. As he punched, the endless waves turned into a blood-colored dragon that roared at Chushio. Facing this punch, Chushio still punched with a simple punch. That punch was the only one in the world. Chapter 10:16. Using real fire to refine one's body. One would be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with the world without relying on the world itself. Chushio's punch was the fist intent that Chen Qingdi had once comprehended. It should be said that every warrior who had practiced real fire to refine their body should be able to comprehend the fist intent. However, Chushio was the kind of person who had mastered it in a short period of time. Therefore, this punch, which did not rely on the world and completely exerted his own strength to the extreme, was only comprehended by Chushio now. Among those of the same level, when it came to physical cultivation, Chushio was invincible except for Chen Qingdi. The blood-colored water dragon was smashed, and the boundless blood chi was completely smashed by the power of this punch, turning into a blood mist that drifted around. Bailey Pobbing had a complicated expression on his face. From the moment Chushio blasted out this punch, he knew that he had lost. The power of this punch was not something he could resist. It could even be said that the power of this punch was the ultimate power that he had always pursued. However, fate made a fool out of him. He had never imagined that he would die under such a punch. When Chushio's punch fell, Bailey Pobbing instantly felt a strong force pouring into his body. In an instant, his eyes were covered by a blood-red color, and in the blink of an eye, he was no longer breathing. Chu Xiu's punch had shattered all the defenses of his body, and even his bones had been smashed. At this time, under the sea, Bailey Pobbing's boat had floated up, but all the people on the boat had been buried at the bottom of the sea. Because of the formation, the wind and waves under the sea were not ordinary. Apart from Bailey Pobbing, who had cultivated real fire to the spiritual refinement realm, no one could walk on the water in such an environment. Casually throwing Bailey Pobbing's body onto the deck, Chu Xiu walked out of the water curtain magic array. Pak Donglai's boat was already waiting for him there. Seeing that Chu Xiu had dealt with Bailey Pobbing so quickly this time, Pak Donglai was also surprised. However, with the incident with Nailan Hai as a foundation, he was able to withstand it. Official Chu, are you looking for an opportunity to get rid of Fu Longxiao? Chu Xiu nodded and said, it would be best if we can get rid of Fu Longxiao. However, 2 people had died in a row. Even if Fu Longxiao was an idiot, he would be able to guess that we were coming for him. He probably didn't have a chance. But it doesn't matter. With our current strength, it won't be a problem for us to attack Sovereign Island. Pak Donglai nodded. He was really convinced now. After getting rid of 2 of Hua Xingzuan's foster sons in one go, their plan was almost in the bag this time. On the second day, Bailey Pobbing's boat and corpse were found. The sea they stopped at wasn't considered remote, and there were many boats coming and going. Bailey Pobbing's steel boat was very famous in the breezy ocean. Everyone was a little confused when they saw his boat parked there motionlessly. But when they saw Bailey Pobbing's corpse, they were in an uproar. The entire breezy ocean was instantly in an uproar. When Nailan Hai died, most people didn't know about it. After all, Nailan Hai's corpse was found by the Hua family. But this time, Bailey Pobbing's corpse was found by others. Someone even spread the news that Nailan Hai was dead too. Now the entire breezy ocean was in a state of panic. Someone seemed to have realized that this was targeting the 5th Lord Hua. The entire breezy ocean was showing signs of changing. Currently on Sovereign Island, Hua Xingzuan and Fu Longxiao looked at Bailey Pobbing's corpse on the ground and felt chills down their spines. Yesterday, Bailey Pobbing was still inspecting Nailan Hai's corpse with them. But today he was already a corpse. Who could take such a blow? What's going on? What's going on? Hua Xingzuan was about to go crazy. His life had been too smooth sailing. Ever since he obtained the pair of God eyes, all he had to do was to place his bets and follow his superiors who had a promising future. When he had a certain level of influence, he started to nurture his foster sons, such as Qiu Tianya. All the fights and battles were handled by his foster sons, and he was only responsible for reaping the fruits of their labor. As a senior who was almost 400 years old, the setbacks and hardships he had experienced couldn't even be compared to a lone cultivator, who had been in the pugilistic world for a few years. Having a smooth sailing life wasn't a good thing. It was better to suffer early. If he didn't experience any setbacks and hardships when he was young, he would be scared to death by the pressure when he was old. Compared to Hua Xingzuan, Fu Longxiao was much calmer. In the Fenghai Ocean he could still rely on Hua Xingzuan's influence. But in the Fenghai Ocean he had to rely on his own strength to survive. Hua Xingzuan said in a deep voice, "Godfather, we can be sure now. These people are here for our Venerable Island's branch. And they're definitely not alone. No matter how strong a person is, even if he could kill second brother and the 4th prince, he couldn't have done it without making a sound. The 4th prince was killed by halberd, while second brother's bones were crushed by absolute strength in his area of expertise. In other words, the other party had at least 2 powerful cultivators, and a powerful force helping them to cover their tracks. Hua Xingzuan was completely panicking. Who is it that wants to go against us? When have I offended such a powerful cultivator in all these years? Sigh, if only I had known earlier, I would have found a fortune teller for this birthday. It's an unlucky year. Fu Longxiao frowned. At this moment, he suddenly felt that his godfather was only SOSO. Previously, Hua Xingzuan's name as the God of Eyes had spread far and wide. When Fu Longxiao learned that he was Hua Xingzuan's godson, he was overjoyed and thought that he could finally make a name for himself. However, he neglected one point. He was able to achieve what he had today not because he was Hua Xingzuan's godson. Instead, it was their achievements that made Hua Xingzuan who he was today. However, Hua Xingzuan was simply too calm in the past. He was so calm that it was as if everything was under his control. But now, Hua Xingzuan's attitude made Fu Longshao a little uncomfortable. He coughed and said, "Godfather, the enemy is in the dark while we're out in the open. Everything will be fine as long as we defend Supreme Island." Before Hua Xingzuan could say anything, a servant suddenly came to report, "Master, Tian Yishui Hall's Pavilion Lord Pak Donglai, Stormy Waves Alliance's leader Ko Shintong, and Cetacean Society's leader Long Tianying are here to visit." "What are they here for?" Fu Longshao frowned. "They should be here to pay their respects after learning of second brother's death," Hua Xingzuan replied after thinking for a while. "They've been rather obedient all these years, especially Long Tianying. He gave many of his businesses in Cetacean Society to my Hua family." Fu Longshao twitched his mouth. Long Tianying didn't give them those businesses, but the Hua family snatched them away. "Godfather, don't be careless. None of them are easy to get along with. Ko Shintong has a grudge against second brother. It's already good enough that he didn't set off firecrackers to celebrate second brother's death. Why would he come to pay his respects? As for that Pak Donglai, don't be fooled by his forthright appearance. He's actually a scheming person, and he's good at hiding a dagger behind his smile. It's best to be careful." "It can't be right?" Hua Xingzuan was confused. "Pak Donglai has been very obedient all these years. Every birthday celebration, he would give the most expensive present apart from the two of you." Hua Xingzuan believed in his own judgment, but he forgot that he could only see a person's future achievements. He couldn't see a person's true thoughts. Fu Longshao smiled bitterly in his heart. This was the problem. "Pak Donglai isn't even your godson. Why does he have to give me such good things every time?" With his guard up, Fu Longshao followed behind Hua Xingzuan and walked out together. In the main hall, Pak Donglai and the other two were there. Seeing Hua Xingzuan and the other two walking out, Pak Donglai quickly stood up and said, "Fifth Lord, I heard something happened to Bailey Island's Lord. What happened?" Hua Xingzuan's face was gloomy. He waved his hand and said, "I'm afraid someone saw that I've been controlling Donghai for too long, so they want to jump out and cause trouble. By the way, why did the three of you come this time?" Pak Donglai took a step forward and said, "We heard something happened to Bailey Island's Lord, so we wanted to take a look and offer our condolences. Also, I have a piece of news that I want to tell you, Fifth Lord." "What news?" Pak Donglai took another step forward and said, "Our Tian Yishui Hall often has fleets that purchase all kinds of resources coming and going from various seas. When Bailey Island's Lord was killed, one of our Tian Yishui Hall's fleets happened to pass by not far from where Bailey Island's Lord was killed, and they noticed something." Hua Xingzuan immediately went forward and said, "Oh, what did you find?" Pak Donglai said in a deep voice, "We found out that the people who killed Bailey Pobbing are us." As soon as he said that, Pak Donglai's expression instantly became extremely ferocious. A small crimson sword had appeared in his hand without anyone noticing. The small sword was only the length of a forearm, but it seemed to be made of magma. It was so hot that it was distorting the surrounding space. "Old fart, you know that you've controlled East Sea for too long. Since that's the case, you should be prepared to give up your position." The next moment, the crimson sword had already broken through the space, easily tearing apart Hua Xingzuan's protective aura, and the next moment, it would completely pierce into his chest. Even Fu Longshao couldn't react in time. Fu Longshao was in charge of the Blue Dragon fleet, so he was naturally quite knowledgeable. Therefore, he could tell at a glance, just like Chu Xiu, that Pak Donglai was a schemer. He was definitely a smiling tiger, unlike how he appeared to be submissive on the surface. However, he didn't expect Pak Donglai to have the intention to kill Hua Xingzuan. He actually dared to do it on Paragon Island. When they were guessing who the murderer was, they didn't expect Pak Donglai to be one of them. It was too late to stop the attack. However, a pill suddenly appeared in front of Hua Xingzuan. That pill seemed to be made of gold and iron. Countless extremely sharp and resplendent sword chi burst out from it, and in an instant, it had already completely strangled the crimson sword. Chapter 1017. Pak Donglai's sudden assassination had already caused Hua Xingzuan to break out in cold sweat. For Hua Xingzuan, who had lived like a prince for over 100 years, even if he were to fight with Pak Donglai one-on-one, he wouldn't be a match for Pak Donglai, let alone this kind of sudden assassination. Fortunately, he still had a trump card, which was the pill he had on him. This was the sword pill that Qiu Tianya had given to Hua Xingzuan. A sword pill that was formed by gathering boundless sword qi in one's dantian was a method used by some sword grandmasters in ancient times. When facing an enemy, a sword pill would be spat out from one's dantian, and boundless sword qi would be released. The killing power would be abnormally shocking. However, in the later stages, this method was abandoned because it was too time-consuming. Condensing a sword pellet could easily take years as the unit of measurement. 1 to 2 years was considered fast. Usually, it would take several years to successfully condense a sword pill. Furthermore, once the sword pill was damaged, not only would several years of effort be wasted, one's vitality would also be damaged. Compared to this, the increase in combat power was obviously not worth it. Therefore, in the later stages, the sword pill was gradually eliminated as a method of sword cultivation. In the past, no one knew where Qiu Tianya had obtained the cultivation method for this sword pill. He didn't plan to use it himself, but he had given it to Hua Xingzuan as a protective treasure. His talent in swordsmanship could be said to be unparalleled. Others had spent several years to successfully condense the sword pill, but he had only spent 1 year to condense it. Moreover, he had risked damaging his own vitality to separate it from his body and hand it over to Hua Xingzuan, so that he could save his life. He had never thought that it would really come in handy today. Looking at the flashing sword qi on the sword pill, Hua Xingzuan breathed heavily. He looked at Pak Donglai, and with lingering fear he shouted angrily, "Pak Donglai, you actually dared to kill I? Are you courting death? Fine, fine, fine. Today, I will fulfill your wish. Not only will you die, but everyone in Taiyuan Hall will also be executed." Hua Xingzuan shouted crazily, but Fu Longxiao didn't seem to be excited. In fact, he even felt a trace of uneasiness. Pak Donglai was simply too calm, so calm that it was as if his assassination had not failed. What else did he have to rely on? Very soon Fu Longxiao found out. When Chu Xiu and Yi Buoxuan stepped into the hall, he clicked his tongue and shook his head. "Mr. Bo, I told you this move of yours is useless. Hua Xingzuan has been in the breezy sea for so many years, and there must be more than one person who wants his life. There must be more than one person who has used assassination methods. Yet he is still alive and well. How could he not have a trump card?" Pak Donglai smiled and said, "There's nothing wrong with trying. If we can kill him, it will save us a lot of effort." At this moment, whether it was Hua Xingzuan or Fu Longxiao, they all looked at Chu Xiu in shock. At the same time, their eyes flashed with intense disbelief. Chu Xiu had clearly left, so when did he return? Hua Xingzuan pointed at Chu Xiu, his finger even trembling, and said, "You killed second brother and the fourth prince? Why? Just because I didn't agree to attack Eastern Qi back then? You want to wipe out Paragon Island? Chu Xiu, you are so ruthless. What a vicious move." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Of course that's part of the reason, but there's another reason. You want to be my father, and that makes me very unhappy. Of course, if you know how my last father died, you will feel very comforted. Those who want to be my father usually end up in a rather miserable state." Hua Xingzuan's eyes widened. He never expected Chu Xiu to come for revenge for such a ridiculous reason. He had adopted a son for so many years, and it wasn't as if he had never failed. For example, he once told Kong Dongming that he wanted to adopt him as his son, but Kong Dongming didn't agree, so he let it go. Why did it lead to a massacre this time? Chu Xiu suddenly laughed and said, "I'm just joking. I, Chu Xiu, am not that narrow-minded. Everyone in the Central Plains Warriors knows that Chu Xiu is famous for being broad-minded. But Fifth Lord Hua, since you don't want to help me, I have to find another way out. I'm very satisfied with Mr. Bo's offer, and I can also fulfill his offer, which is to wipe out Paragon Island." Hua Xingzuan gritted his teeth and said, "You betrayed us and killed Pak Donglai. I promise you that I will gather all the forces in the breezy ocean to help you attack Eastern Qi." Hearing this, everyone, including Fu Longxiao, couldn't help but look at Hua Xingzuan. Chu Xiu was stunned for a moment. Then he laughed and said, "Fifth Lord Hua, you're already a few hundred years old. Can you not be so naive? You've already killed half of your people, and you've even unsheathed your sword. Is it possible for you to take it back now? What's done can't be taken back, and what's done can't be disobeyed. Today, it's your fate to die." Perhaps it was because Hua Xingzuan realized that he had reached a dead end. He was no longer as terrified and panicky as before. He said coldly, "Do you really think it's that easy to kill I?" Fu Longxiao's nerves were stretched to the limit, and he was ready to escape at any time. That's right, he was going to escape by himself. He had no intention of bringing Hua Xingzuan along. He had repaid Hua Xingzuan with enough things over the years. He didn't want to wait here and die with Hua Xingzuan. Chu Xiu, Yi Buoxuan, Pak Donglai, and Ko Shintong. 4 true fire spirit refinement state cultivators were more than enough to attack Supremacy Island. This was especially so for Chu Xiu. He alone was more terrifying than the remaining 3 people combined. What could they use to fight? How could they continue fighting? Pak Donglai and Ko Shintong each took out a cylindrical object. They moved it lightly, and light pierced through the houses and shot into the sky. The fleets from Tainyishui Hall and the Stormy Tide Alliance that were lying in ambush were rushing over from all directions, ready to destroy Sovereign Island. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "Sword pellet? This thing is quite interesting. Leave it to me. The 3 of you, don't let Fu Longxiao escape." The expressions of everyone present were extremely relaxed. Things were almost in the bag now that things had developed to this point. Ko Shintong had a huge grudge against Sovereign Island's Hua family, so he charged towards Fu Longxiao with earth energy. Yi Buoxuan and Pak Donglai walked to the back slowly, blocking any way that Fu Longxiao could dodge. Just as Fu Longxiao was about to fight to the death, Hua Xingzuan waved his hand as fast as he could. Blood splattered as he drew runes in the air. His speed was so fast that it was as if he had practiced it countless times. Chu Xiu punched out, but the sword pellet released an extremely sharp sword energy. The power within it was actually able to clash head-on with Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu didn't take a single step back. In that moment of delay, the entire Sovereign Island started shaking. It was as if an earth dragon was turning over. Pak Donglai suddenly thought of something. He shouted, "Quick, get rid of Fu Longxiao." As soon as his voice fell, he saw countless arrows shining with the 5 elements Gang Qi exploding toward them. The energy on the arrows was the purest energy of heaven and earth. They also contained extremely pure power. Moreover, the arrowheads of the arrows were made with the material of divine weapons. Even Pak Donglai and the others wouldn't be able to withstand it for a long time. Just then the 5th Lord Hua shouted, "Ing! Quick attack! Kill him!" As soon as the 5th Lord Hua shouted, an arrow immediately shot towards Chu Xiu. However, the moment he saw the arrow, Chu Xiu's expression changed. It wasn't because the arrow was too strong. Instead, it was because Chu Xiu was too familiar with it. The pitch-black arrow was infused with the power of nirvanic extermination. It was actually the Triple City Destruction arrow. The flames around Chu Xiu burned intensely. He punched out and collided with the Triple City Destroying arrow. With a loud bang, the flames of destruction immediately detonated the destructive power. In the past, Chu Xiu had always used this arrow to deal with others. However, when it was his turn to bear the power, he finally realized how overbearing the power of the Triple City Destroying arrow was. One could only use pure power to counteract it. No other method could completely dissolve the destructive power. Just then, Chu Xiu also saw the appearance of the person who shot the Triple City Destroying arrow. It was a tall, thin man dressed in a black robe from head to toe. Half of his face was covered by a black veil as he stood in a dark corner. However, his powerful demonic aura attracted everyone's attention, including Fu Longxiao. Although he had vaguely heard that his adoptive father seemed to have an adopted son protecting him in secret, this was the first time he had seen this person in person. His attack was so powerful that it was shocking. The man in black was the adopted son of the 5th Lord Hua, but he was also not. He was the shadow of the 5th Lord Hua, the shadow that had always been hiding in the dark. The other adopted sons had been found by Huoxingzuan on his own initiative. Only Ying had been accidentally rescued by Huoxingzuan. At that time, Ying was drifting on the sea and was rescued by Huoxingzuan. However, Ying was already severely injured and did not even have long to live. Huoxingzuan could see the light on his body flickering. It was obvious that he would become an expert in the future if he could survive. If he couldn't, there was nothing more to say. Although Huoxingzuan had gathered many famous doctors to treat him, Ying's injuries still could not be healed. He had to ensure that he slept for a long time, every day, to preserve his lifespan. Therefore, he took the initiative to hibernate under the Supreme Island. From then on, he would protect the entire Supreme Island as Huoxingzuan's shadow. Only Huoxingzuan alone could wake him up with a secret technique. Every time Ying attacked, it would consume his little lifespan. All these years, everything had been smooth sailing for Huoxingzuan. Even though he had some enemies, none of them could threaten his life. He did not expect to encounter a life-or-death situation when he used Ying's trump card for the first time. However, Chu Xiu did not care about Huoxingzuan. Instead, he stared at Ying and asked, "Where did you get your triple city destroying arrow?" Chapter 10:18. The triple city extinguishing arrow, which was Dugu Weiwei's strongest killing move in the past, was now in the hands of an outsider. This made Chu Xiu very surprised, and even horrified. Wei Shuya had already said that Dugu Weiwei's inheritance was very little. The triple city extinguishing arrow was left behind by Dugu Weiwei in the illusion. As for the remaining martial techniques or powers related to Dugu Weiwei, it could be said that Chu Xiu had obtained them through various coincidences. In the end, someone had used the triple link city destruction arrow overseas. How could Chu Xiu not be astonished? That was because this involved a single matter. That was whether or not they had found Dugu Weiwei's corpse. Whether Dugu Weiwei was dead or alive was important to others, but it was more important to Chu Xiu. This was related to who he, Chu Xiu, was. At this moment, Chu Xiu couldn't be bothered with Huoxingzuan anymore. He only wanted to know from Ying where he obtained the triple city extinguishing arrow. At this moment, Huoxingzuan shouted, "Ying, kill him! Kill this bastard!" Although it was Huoxingzuan who had saved Ying's life, even Huoxingzuan could not figure out his background. He only needed to know that Ying was willing to be his shadow for life to repay him for saving his life. That was enough. At this moment, the outside world stopped shaking. The ground cracked open, and mechanical puppets made of metal walked out of the ground. There were more than 100 of them. Some of these mechanical puppets were holding bows and arrows, while others were holding sabers and spears. The arrows containing the pure power of the 5 elements that had been shot at them earlier had been shot by these mechanical puppets. Pak Donglai's expression changed. It's the Prophecy Island. The predecessor of the Supreme Island is actually the Prophecy Island. Previously, Pak Donglai suspected that there was something strange about the Supreme Island itself. Now it seemed that the strangeness was huge. The Prophecy Island was a big island in the ancient times. It monopolized all resources and utilized the mechanical puppets to the extreme. The puppets made with divine weapon materials could even fight against real fire spirit refinement state. Later on, it was rumored that the Prophecy Island fell into the eye of the sea. Now, it seemed that the Prophecy Island was clearly obtained by Huoxingzuan. He used some means to disguise it and turned it into the current Supreme Island. These mechanical puppets on the Heavenly Fortune Island could still be used. In a one-on-one fight, these things couldn't even defeat a real pellet state martial artist. But at this time, hundreds of mechanical puppets attacked together. The power could already threaten the existence of real fire spirit refinement state. Do you really think that after so many years, I don't have any trump cards and can only be slaughtered by you? These years, I have asked people to repair nearly half of the mechanical puppets. They are indeed the products of the Prophecy Island. The power of each mechanical puppet is comparable to the real pellet state. With hundreds of mechanical puppets, even if the existence of the heaven and earth mystic state comes, I will not be afraid. Looking at those mechanical puppets, Pak Donglai gritted his teeth and said, "For so many years, people have offered some materials for forging divine weapons and things like spirit stones. Even if you can't use them, you still accept them all. Now it seems that you are simply using the birthday celebration to collect the materials to rebuild these prophecy sex puppets. Hua Xingzuan touched the beard on his chin and said proudly, "You only thought of it now? It's too late. The materials and spirit stones in these puppets might have been offered by you." In fact, Hua Xingzuan was just talking to his heart's content. He wasn't as scheming as Pak Donglai thought. Hua Xingzuan liked to celebrate his birthday because he liked to show off. However, after many birthday celebrations, he had accumulated all kinds of materials in his hands, and he couldn't use them. So he remembered that there seemed to be a pile of scrap metal buried under his island. He tried to get someone to repair it, and he didn't expect it to be successfully repaired. "All of you attack." As Hua Xingzuan's voice fell, those mechanical puppets all rushed toward Pak Donglai and others crazily. The strength of these mechanical puppets was indeed not good, but ants could bite an elephant to death. With so many mechanical puppets rushing together, it was not so easy to deal with. At this time, Chu Xiu had already begun to fight with the mysterious shadow. The other party was definitely a demonic cultivator. To be precise, all his inheritance came from the Kunlun devil cult. The aura of the other party, and the martial arts he used were definitely the standard inheritors of the Kunlun devil cult. Compared to Chu Xiu, he was even more like a demonic cultivator than Chu Xiu. As Chu Xiu fought, he said, "How on earth did you get your cultivation? What is your relationship with the Kunlun devil cult? Do you know who I am? I am the person who is in charge of the remnants of the Kunlun devil cult." Chu Xiu said so much, but the shadow seemed to not hear him. When he attacked, he was still extremely fierce and didn't hold back at all. Seeing this, Chu Xiu's eyes also showed a hint of coldness. Since he couldn't get an answer out of him, he would capture him first, and then slowly interrogate him. Anyway, there were countless ways to torture him. At this moment, Chu Xiu no longer held back. The power of the heart demon began to suppress the power of the evil moonblade. As the slash descended with dense demonic energy, the blood moon in the sky twisted and devoured everything around it. But at this moment, the surging demonic aura around Obscurus condensed. As his palm fell, the giant demonic aura in the air seemed to tear the world apart. It directly grasped the blood moon in its hand and smashed it to the ground. Heavenly demon palm. Chu Xiu's eyes suddenly shrank. What the other party used was the heavenly demon palm, an early martial art of Dugu Weiwei. In the primitive demon cave, Dugu Weiwei had once used this palm to smash the evil giant tree with human heads, leaving behind traces of the heavenly demon palm. Chu Xiu saw it very clearly. He was absolutely not mistaken. But according to Lu Jianghe, Dugu Weiwei's heavenly demon palm was only a martial art used by Dugu Weiwei in the early days. He only taught it to the heartless demon venerable. It should be impossible for others to use it. Now that Shadow had even used the heavenly demon palm, it was obvious that he had a deep relationship with the Kunlun devil cult. Chu Xiu snorted coldly, and the evil moonblade fell again. The void froze and time and space stagnated. The misty slash fell, instantly splitting everything in front of it, and went straight for Shadow. The demon energy around Shadow surged. The powerful demon energy affected the surrounding power, forming a huge demon energy vortex. It directly tore the roof above. But under the power of Chu Xiu's misty slash, the demon energy vortex was forcibly torn apart, and the violent demon energy scattered in all directions. In the next moment, Chu Xiu's Devil Buddha Dharma avatar appeared around him. Half of the Mahavirokana Dharma avatar formed the colorless ceiling palm imprint, and the other half of the Mahakala Heavenly Devil Dharma avatar appeared in the third eye on its head. Countless pitch-black flames of apocalypse gushed out and shrouded Ing. The Buddhist light suppressed and the world-extinguishing flames attacked. Under this kind of power, Shadow was directly wrapped in it, and his aura was suppressed to the extreme. Just as Chu Xiu was ready to take him down, the aura around Shadow became weaker and weaker. When that aura reached the extreme, a towering demon energy suddenly erupted. A demonic shadow appeared behind him. It was hazy and indistinct, like an ancient demon god. The strangest thing was that there was a pitch-black hole on the demon god's chest. It seemed to be boundless. As the demon god shadow performed a hand seal, countless world-extinguishing flames were instantly enveloped, and absorbed by the black hole on his chest. Shadow let out a long breath, and his aura became even weaker. When it came to power, there were really not many people in the world who were qualified to compare with Chu Xiao. It was the same for him. A demonic Qi longbow condensed, and the Triple City Annihilation arrow shot out explosively towards Chu Xiao. Chu Xiao's eyes narrowed. Triple City Extinguishing Arrow? You're too weak. As Chu Xiao's voice fell, he also shot the Triple City Extinguishing Arrow in his hand. But the difference was that Shadow only shot one arrow, while Chu Xiao shot 3 arrows in a row. The first arrow destroyed both of them, but the second and third arrows followed closely. The demon god Shadow behind Shadow seemed to embrace the heaven and earth, hugging the 2 arrows in its chest. In an instant, the 2 arrows were swallowed, and the demon god Shadow completely exploded and melted. Chu Xiao said lightly, "Surrender. You also saw that I know the martial arts techniques that you know, and I know the ones that you don't. In terms of power, you're too weak. If you continue to fight, you'll just die. Don't force me to kill you." As an existence in the true fire spiritual refinement realm, Shadow certainly knew the gap between him and Chu Xiao, but he seemed not to be afraid of this emotion. His whole body was still surging with hot demon energy, and he attacked Chu Xiao wildly. Chu Xiao frowned. It was easy to kill him, but if he killed him, where could he go to get clues? He said to the inner demon in his mind, "I'll leave this guy to you. Later, find a chance to enter his heart and build an illusion. Dig out all the secrets in his heart for me." This time the inner demon hesitated and said, "I'll try my best." Chu Xiao frowned and said, "Last time when you dealt with Kuang Shiyue, didn't you easily dig out the deepest pain in his heart?" The inner demon made a helpless expression and said, "You humans are the most complicated existence. The strength of the state of mind is not based on personal strength, but on one's heart. For a person with a strong state of mind, even if he is just an ordinary person, I can't do anything to him. But for a person with a weak state of mind, or someone with obvious flaws, even if he is in the mysterious realm of heaven and earth, he will be unable to extricate himself. Last time, the flaw in Kuang Shiyue's state of mind was too big, so big that it could affect his performance. Looking at this guy's performance, I can tell that he is definitely a person with an extremely tough state of mind. I'm not sure if I can succeed." "You must succeed. Otherwise, why would I keep a useless person by my side? Why don't I throw him to Master Yuanji and the others to study slowly?" After saying that, Chu Xiao didn't care about the inner demon's protest and rushed towards Obscurus. Although the inner demon secretly cursed Chu Xiao for being shameless, he had to prepare to attack at any time. He was not a human, but he understood the human heart better than anyone else. What Chu Xiao said was not a threat. He could really do such a thing. Chapter 10:19. Chu Xiao's strength was much stronger than that of Obscurus. If Chu Xiao really wanted to kill him, a single saber intent of the shattering technique would be enough to slice him into 2. However, compared to Huoxingzuan and the messy fights in the East Sea, the news about Dugu Weiwei was more important. It could be said that this was the only time that Chu Xiao was serious since he came to the East Sea. Putting away the evil moonblade, Chu Xiao's body was surrounded by Buddha's light. The Mahavairokkana made a Buddhist seal and suppressed Obscurus with a strong and overbearing Buddhist power. Obscurus kept struggling as if he was not afraid of death. He desperately tried to kill Chu Xiao. But at this moment, the power of the heart demon had already penetrated into Obscurus's body during the fight. For a moment, Obscurus was stunned. He touched his head and seemed to remember many things. He did not belong to the Breezy Sea, but was a member of the Fenghai Sea. He was one of the few rogue cultivators in the Fenghai Sea. In a tsunami, the ship that he and a few of his best friends were on was completely destroyed. They used all their strength to walk on the water. Although they rushed out of the tsunami, they lost their way. On an island that was not marked on the sea map, they found a cave that was emitting devil chi. The group of people entered the cave, accompanied by devil chi, killing, and all kinds of evil powers. They fell one after another. Finally, he saw what was inside. There were 2 corpses sitting on bronze thrones. Although they were dead, the devil chi was so turbulent that it was frightening. He seemed to have taken something from there, and triggered something else. The memory was very vague, leaving him only fear, the great fear of life and death. In the end, he didn't even know how he escaped from that place. He forgot a lot of things. He forgot his own name. He forgot everything. The only thing he couldn't forget was the things he took out from that place. He had forgotten all the martial arts that he had cultivated in the past, but he had learned the martial arts that he had taken out from that place. However, the price he had to pay was that he had reversed the demonic arts and entered a state of complete chi deviation. He was just one step away from being annihilated. Later on, he was saved by Huoxingzuan. He did not know who the person who saved him was, but he seemed to remember that when he was very young, there was a person called Shifu who told him that the kindness of a drop of water should be returned with a gushing spring. He felt that this sentence was very funny, but he only remembered this sentence, so he decided to do as it said. From then on, he became Ing, the final trump card of Huoxingzuan, the Ing that protected him. That hazy feeling completely dissipated. In the next moment, the evil moon blade slashed down with a soaring demonic energy. Shadow subconsciously tried to block it, but the twisted red moon had already shattered his protective true energy. The evil moon blade pierced straight into his chest. You don't even have your memories anymore. Right now, you're nothing more than a walking corpse. Killing you is also a form of release for you. The long blade was pulled out, and Shadow's body crashed to the ground. There was no pain or hatred in his eyes, and of course, there was no release, because the current him no longer knew what the concept of death was. The heart demon did not dig out all the memories of the other party, only some memory fragments. However, these things were enough to piece together a complete sequence of events. This person was a rogue cultivator from the Windbreaker Sea. He and a group of brothers and friends encountered a tsunami, and accidentally arrived on an island, and found the ruins of a devil's den. In the ruins, many of them died, and in the end, only he survived. He also brought out something similar to a cultivation method, but he was seriously injured, causing him to lose all his memories. Instead, he went to cultivate the cultivation method he took out from the devil's den, but it led to chi deviation, and he was seriously injured. However, this time he was lucky, and he was saved by Huoxingzuan, and became his shadow. No wonder this Ing looked so strange, as if he had no feelings at all. In fact, he had no feelings at all. When a person lost all his memories, would he still be the person he was? Perhaps in the eyes of others, as long as he had a body he would be, but to him he was actually already dead. However, the only pity was that his memory fragments were too fragmented, and some key scenes could not be seen clearly at all. For example, the two corpses sitting on the bronze thrones. He could not see their faces at all. Previously, Chu Xiu thought that one of the corpses was Dugu Weiwei, but after thinking about it carefully, he felt that something was wrong. If it was Dugu Weiwei, then the other person should be Ning Xuanji. However, in Ying's memory fragments, both of them were exuding devil qi, but these were not important anymore. He had already found the general location of that place in his memory fragments. When things here were settled, he would definitely go there personally. But for now, he had to get rid of Huoxingzuan first. At that moment, when Huoxingzuan saw that Chu Xiu had actually killed Ing, he really panicked. Those mechanical puppets of the Heaven Secrets sect were his trump cards, and Ing was even more so. But now, one of his trump cards was already dead, and the other one would not last long. Those mechanical puppets were powered by extremely precious spirit stones. Once the spirit stones were used up, they would immediately become a pile of scrap metal. In terms of endurance, an existence at the true fire spirit refinement stage was definitely much better than a pile of scrap metal. Looking at Huoxingzuan's appearance, Chu Xiu could not help but shake his head. This person was already crippled. Relying on his pair of divine eyes, Huoxingzuan had always relied on others for his entire life. How many years had it been since he last fought with others? To be precise, he could count the number of times he had fought with others since he was young. Just now everyone was fighting fiercely. No matter what, Huoxingzuan was at the true fire spirit refinement stage, but he actually did not help Ing or Fu Longxiao. In his heart, there was no concept of fighting with others. The path of martial arts was the path of war and killing. A martial artist who had even forgotten how to kill was not trash. What was he? Seeing that Chu Xiu's saber was coming towards him, Hua Xingzuan shouted, and immediately sent the sword ball in his hand forward. This sword ball was given to Hua Xingzuan by Qiu Tianya to protect his life, and its power was indeed somewhat beyond imagination. After all, it was refined by an expert in the path of the sword for a year. However, no matter how powerful the sword ball was, it was still a dead object without sentience. In other words, even Qiu Tianya did not expect that his godfather would actually provoke an expert of Chu Xiu's level. Boundless apocalyptic flames were released, directly wrapping around the sword ball. In an instant, tens of thousands of sword chi from the sword ball shot out at the same time, strangling the apocalyptic flames. The apocalyptic flames were extremely sticky, and once the sword ball was entangled, it could not escape for a while. The next moment, the evil moon blade in Chu Xiu's hand slashed down, heading straight for Hua Xingzuan. In a panic, Hua Xingzuan's earth energy exploded from his body, but it was chaotic and disorderly. Even Chu Xiu did not know what he was trying to do. After so many years, he couldn't have really forgotten how to fight with others, right? However, all of this was no longer important. The crimson evil moon twisted all the power, and the evil moon blade easily pierced through Hua Xingzuan's entire body. Instantly, a large amount of blood spewed out of his mouth. I've said it before, those who want to be my father have never had a good ending. Evil moon blade was pulled out, and Hua Xingzuan's corpse was thrown to the side. At this moment, all the mechanical puppets present froze in place, and some even exploded. Back when he was repairing these mechanical puppets, Hua Xingzuan still had some tricks up his sleeves. These mechanical puppets could only be controlled by his imprint and blood. But now that he was dead, the imprint was naturally broken. These mechanical puppets had all lost their effectiveness. Fu Longxiao's expression changed, but it was already too late. Pak Donglai, Ko Shintong and Yi Buoxuan attacked together. With the sudden explosion, Fu Longxiao did not even have the time to burn his blood essence before he was killed on the spot. The important figures on Supreme Island were all dead. What was left were the useless martial artists from the Hua family. Pak Donglai was still in a daze. His plan actually succeeded just like that? After being stunned for a while, Pak Donglai then cupped his hands respectfully towards Chu Xiu and said, "If it wasn't for official Chu, not only would we not have been able to kill Hua Xingzuan, we would probably have to stay there. Official Chu definitely played a huge role in this success." This time, Pak Donglai admitted that he had really underestimated Hua Xingzuan. Although he had expected that Hua Xingzuan would definitely have some trump cards in his hands, since he had been an honorable in the breezy ocean for such a long time, he did not expect the trump card to be so powerful. The mysterious man in black was actually able to fight with Chu Xiu for such a long time. His abilities could be said to be rather terrifying. After all, when Chu Xiu killed Nalen Hai and Bailey Pobbing back then, he did not even use a few moves. Actually, Pak Donglai had misunderstood this point. Although Ing was slightly more powerful than Nalen Hai and Bailey Pobbing, he was not as powerful as he had imagined. It was not difficult for Chu Xiu to kill him. However, in the beginning, Chu Xiu wanted to capture him alive and interrogate him for information, so he did not kill him. If Chu Xiu really wanted to kill him, Ing would not be able to resist Chu Xiu for such a long time. "Mr. Bo, there's no need to be so courteous. We each get what we need. As long as Mr. Bo does not forget our promise, it will be fine," Chu Xiu said calmly. Pak Donglai quickly said, "Official Chu, don't worry. I will deal with this as soon as I deal with the remaining members of Sovereign Island." After witnessing Chu Xiu's abilities, Pak Donglai did not have the slightest intention of going back on his word. Moreover, he did not have the right to go back on his word. Although they had killed Hua Xingzuan and the martial artists of Sovereign Island, it did not mean that Pak Donglai could become the most powerful person in the breezy ocean. There was no longer a huge mountain above him, but there would still be many small mountains. Right now he, Ko Shintong, and the others were the strongest cultivators of the breezy sea. Only when they joined forces would their words be effective. Otherwise, they would still be fighting on their own, like a pile of loose sand. Chapter 1020. The complete annihilation of Sovereign Island caused a huge uproar in the entire East Sea. In any place, it was not easy to overthrow a force that had ruled for more than 100 years, as it had already become a habit. Now this inertia had been broken, and the entire East Sea had fallen into chaos. However, Pak Donglai, Ko Shintong, and the others were now the largest force in the entire East Sea. Under their joint suppression, the entire breezy ocean adapted to the new order in an extremely short amount of time. As long as it was in the Jianghu, be it in the Central Plains or overseas, it was like a pyramid. It was not a big deal for the upper levels of the pyramid to have problems. What was troublesome was the lower levels. Moreover, Huixingzuan had dominated the cool breeze sea for 100 years. Apart from his title of God's Eye, which people took delight in talking about, Huixingzuan's reputation was not considered good. Without the support of the Eye of God, Huixingzuan was just a mediocre person. His martial arts talent was mediocre, and his vision was narrow. He could only be considered to be a little smart. Pak Donglai and the others did not hide the details of the annihilation of Sovereign Island. If they told others about it, it would actually increase their power. Moreover, most of the people were killed by Chu Xiu, so they did not dare to hide Chu Xiu's power. When they found out that Huixingzuan also died in Chu Xiu's hands, everyone shook their heads and sighed. Fate really made a fool out of people. Previously, everyone had heard that Huixingzuan wanted to adopt Chu Xiu as his son during his birthday celebration, but they ended up falling out. Now, it seemed like Huixingzuan's Eye of God did not lose its effect. Chu Xiu was indeed incredibly talented. He killed almost all the higher-ups of Sovereign Island all by himself, and he killed spiritual refinement realm cultivators like slaughtering chickens and dogs. However, it was a pity that those who were chosen by you, Huixingzuan, didn't necessarily have to join you, Huixingzuan. On the contrary, there was a possibility that they would be the ones to send you to your grave. Huixingzuan relied on his pair of God eyes to rise to power. In the end, it could be said that he also died under his pair of God eyes. This could be considered as fate. After the news spread, Pak Donglai gathered everyone to discuss the matter of attacking Eastern Qi, and everything went smoothly. Chu Xiu's might had already spread throughout the cool breeze ocean. This had also greatly increased everyone's confidence in Chu Xiu. As long as they could occupy a part of the border of the Eastern Qi coast, they would have made a huge profit. After everything was prepared, Chu Xiu did not waste any time and immediately prepared to return to Eastern Qi. Before leaving, Pak Donglai and the others personally came to see Chu Xiu off. Official Chu, don't worry. The forces in the East Sea have begun to gather. Once the plan is completed, they will attack the border of Eastern Qi coast at the first opportunity. Chu Xiu nodded and said, I believe in Mr. Bo's strength. This is only the first cooperation, and there may be opportunities for us to work together in the future. I don't know what the situation is in the northern Yan coast, so I won't delay any longer. Everyone farewell. After saying that, Chu Xiu immediately boarded the ship and left with Yi Buoxuan. Watching Chu Xiu's departing figure, Pak Donglai suddenly sighed and said, Until today, I seem to have understood a truth. Why is Kong Dongming so obsessed with martial arts? The path of martial arts is as vast and boundless as the East Sea. All our schemes are just like a boat sailing on the sea. It seems stable, but in fact, it can't withstand a single wave. Kong Dongming is such a person, and so is Chu Xiu. In the face of absolute power, even a giant steel ship can't withstand a single blow. Ko Shintong also sighed and said, I also understand this truth. Everyone wants to see where the end of the sea is, but unfortunately, the more profound one's cultivation is, the more afraid one is of the road ahead. Before I stepped into the true fire spirit refining state, I was also obsessed with cultivation. Every time I went into closed-door training, it would easily last for several years. But now closed-door training for more than a year is rare. Experts like Pak Donglai and Ko Shintong, who were able to reach the true fire spirit refining state, naturally had talent and perseverance. At this time, they spent most of their time currying favor with other forces instead of practicing martial arts. This was not because they slacked off, but because of fear. As Pak Donglai said, martial arts was like this boundless sea, and no one knew where the boundary was. When they first started practicing martial arts, They thought that the real pellet state was the limit. Later, when they reached the real pellet state, they thought that the true fire spirit refining state was the strongest. When they reached the true fire spirit refining state, they discovered that in the face of the heaven and earth mysterious realm powerhouses, they were just slightly stronger ants. They couldn't see the boundary, so they were afraid because they didn't know what the road ahead was. People like Kong Dongming's character and Chu Xiu's dedication to power, only such people might be qualified to reach the peak. Let's go back and summon all forces to discuss and attack Eastern Qi as soon as possible. This official Chu has a promising future, and it's always right to be on good terms with him now. Pak Donglai said this not because he also had the divine eyes and was really optimistic about Chu Xiu's future luck, but because Hu Xingzuan had already set a negative example. Be on good terms with Chu Xiu, gain power and gain benefits. Become enemies with Chu Xiu, report to the underworld. At the same time, while Chu Xiu was planning everything overseas, the Northern Yan side was almost unable to resist. The national power of Eastern Qi was stronger than that of Northern Yan, and similarly, the power of Eastern Qi was also much stronger than that of Northern Yan. Within the borders of Eastern Qi, Northern Yan Daoist sects and righteous sects had joined forces, and the Yinma clan almost couldn't resist the pressure. The Guanzhong torture room had already retreated, but at the border between Eastern Qi and Northern Yan, 7 of Eastern Qi's 9 strong armies suddenly pressed forward, almost causing the Northern Yan side to collapse. Beigong Bailey was also a ruthless man. He directly mobilized 1/10 of the entire 5th Army to fight the enemy, disregarding the casualties. When the number of dead had reached a certain level, he lured the enemy deeper into the battlefield, and set up a blood-refining formation on the battlefield, directly killing one of the 9 Eastern Qi armies. At the same time, his own people were also killed in the formation. It could be said that killing 1,000 enemies came with 600 casualties. The entire blood-refining formation stretched for dozens of miles. Within the formation, blood filled the sky, and all life was extinguished. The Eastern Qi side didn't even dare to send large numbers of troops to fight to the death. They could only launch small surprise attacks, afraid that Beigong Bailey would come up with another plan to kill them. This man was practically a madman. When he went crazy, he would even kill his own people. It was only because of Beigong Bailey's prestige that the Northern Yan side didn't mutiny. Otherwise, if it were anyone else who dared to do such a thing, they would probably have killed themselves first. In the military camp at the border of Northern Yan, Xiang Wu held a banana in one hand and a defensive map in the other, carefully studying it. From time to time, he would take a big bite out of the banana, as if he was biting the scum of Eastern Qi. At this time, Beigong Bailey opened the tent flap and walked in. He was no longer dressed in a scholar's robe when he was in the Northern Yan court. Instead, he wore a scarlet armor, and the murderous aura around him seemed to solidify. Seeing Beigong Bailey enter, Xiang Wu handed him a banana. Beigong Bailey shook his head and asked, "How's the situation on your side?" Xiang Wu's expression was solemn. "It's not looking good. I've already pulled back the defensive line by more than 10 miles. I'm using the terrain to deal with them. It wasn't easy to defeat the Eastern Qi's Flying Bear army, but I didn't expect the Imperial Guard to catch up. However, that bastard Nangong Weiyu seems to be injured. Even his flashy halberd is gone. Now he's fighting me with an ordinary precious weapon, but he couldn't hold on after a few blows. If it weren't for that old bastard's speed, I would have crippled him on the spot." As he spoke, Xiang Wu took a big bite out of the banana and swallowed the last bit into his stomach. Beigong Bailey furrowed his brows. "The Imperial Guard is here too? I just killed one of their armies. In the blink of an eye, they have sent out another Yulin Royal Guards. Doesn't that mean that there is only one army guarding all of Eastern Qi?" Xiang Wu spread his hands and said, "There isn't even a single army left. A while ago, West Chu had already acted. Yuan Fu, that jade-faced fat dragon, led the Lengjia army to the West Chu border, but he could only delay the last army of Eastern Qi. West Chu's strength is too weak, and this is already their limit. Otherwise, if all 9 armies were to come, we would be under even more pressure. Now that Eastern Qi's internal and external forces are moving, as long as the imperial city is protected by experts, what do they have to fear? We can't just fly over and kill Lu Haochang, right? At this stage of the war, it was no longer a matter of strategy, but a matter of basic strength. Eastern Qi's national strength was too strong. Once they went all out, the Northern Yan could only choose to defend with all their might. Bagong Bailey waved his hand. Even if we can't hold on, we have to hold on until Lu Haochang can't hold on any longer. Eastern Qi's strength is strong, but perhaps the heavens didn't let Eastern Qi have the luck to unify the world. The successive generations of Eastern Qi's emperors were all mediocre. Our Northern Yan has the determination to fight with all 5 armies, but Eastern Qi's heart aches at losing even one army. If we can't take down Northern Yan in the end, the last one to retreat will be Eastern Qi. The last war between Northern Yan and Eastern Qi ended in the same way. Actually, Northern Yan didn't win, and Eastern Qi didn't lose either. It was just that Lu Haochang's character was there. He was used to being cautious and didn't want to gamble too much, so he didn't continue to attack and cut his losses in time, tacitly agreeing that Northern Yan would tear Wei Jun apart. Now that decades had passed, LV Haochang was already old, and his boldness was probably not as good as it was in the past. Now he only wanted to pass on the throne safely and steadily, and he probably could not withstand any more setbacks. Xiang Wu looked to the east, a rare look of worry on his face. We can still hold on for a while, but Wei Jun will have to face the entire Eastern Qi's righteous martial world, and the attack of Jiangshan Pavilion. I don't know if they can hold on. Speaking of which, where did Chu Xiu go? Can he be more reliable? He disappeared at the critical moment. I won't treat him to bananas next time. Chapter 1021. Xiang Wu had said that the situation in Wei County was terrible, and it was even worse than what he had said. Wei County was now called Wei Country. Jiangshan Pavilion's newly established Wei Country took the lead and recruited all the warriors in Wei County as the vanguard to attack. The Rivers and Mountains Pavilion didn't have any other advantages. Its only advantage was that it was rich, very rich. For so many years, Jiangshan Pavilion had relied on the power of Hua Xingzuan to almost monopolize the overseas trade with the Central Plains. They had even robbed a lot of business that originally belonged to the Cetacean Society. They had accumulated a lot of wealth over the years. Brave men were bound to be motivated by generous rewards. Although the warriors in Wei County were xenophobic, under the enticement of Jiangshan Pavilion, they obediently followed the orders of Jiangshan Pavilion and acted as the vanguard. Apart from these, Chunyang Dao sect, Real Martial Arts sect, White Tiger Hall, and a group of Eastern Qi Orthodox martial artists joined in, putting great pressure on the Zhenwu Hall. At the moment, the ones in charge of defending Wei County from the Northern Yan Kingdom were the Zhenwu Hall, as well as the people from the Yinma clan brought by Wei Shuya, as well as the people from the Imperial Consecration Hall led by Xiang Chong, and even some experts from the Northern Yan royal family. Although the number of people gathered in Wei County was not as many as at the border, they were all high-level warriors, and the fight was fierce. Most importantly, at the border, Bagong Bailey could still rely on his ruthless strategy and arrangement of troops to restrain Eastern Qi. Over at Wei County at this point, no matter what strategy you had, it would be useless. It was all about strength. At this time, in a small town near Mount Shangmeng in Wei County, Wei Shuya and the others were all there, but they did not look well. Almost all of them were injured. There was still Shangmeng Mountain between the Wei County and the Eastern Yan region of the Northern Yan Kingdom. They had already fought once before, and the result was that the Northern Yan Kingdom was defeated and lost Shangmeng Mountain. They were forced to the Eastern Yan region. In the last battle, Ling Yunzi of the Chunyang Dao sect had attacked directly. The power of the heaven and earth mysterious realm was simply invincible. Although Shang Tianliang's comprehension ability wasn't bad, and his cultivation was already comparable to Ling Yunzi's, his combat strength was still a level lower than Ling Yunzi's. It wasn't because of his own strength, but because of external forces. In a battle between experts, even the slightest gap could determine victory and defeat. Shi Yunzi had activated the pure Yang divine weapon with his blood essence, and Yun Mengzi had taught Ling Yunzi a secret magic that had been lost in Chunyang Dao sect for a long time, which allowed him to activate the mark on the pure Yang divine weapon and defeat Shang Tianliang. At the same time, Wei Shuya and the others began to fight with the warriors from Jiangshan Pavilion, Chunyang Dao Sect, True Martial Sect, White Tiger Hall, and the Northern Yen Righteous Martial Arts World. This group of people originally had a large number of people. Even on the side of the Righteous Martial Arts World, several hidden rogue cultivators had been invited. They were all experts of the True Fire spiritual cultivation realm. In terms of high-end combat strength, they also crushed the people from the Jinwu Hall. The people from the Jinwu Hall were almost forced to retreat in defeat. In the end, they had to rely on Xiang Chong to use the origin of the dragon vein in the 9 dragon seal to repel the opponents. However, they had to give up Shangmeng Mountain. The origin of the dragon vein could not be used easily. Otherwise, once the origin of the dragon vein was damaged, it would be a great blow to the fate of the Northern Yen nation. If the next attack was still so fierce, the people from the Jinwu Hall could only retreat again and again. At this time, seeing that the atmosphere in the lobby was a little tense, Lu Jiang he couldn't help but say, "I say, everyone, don't look like your mother died, okay? Chu Xiu hasn't come back yet. He is our last trump card." Among the people present, almost everyone had some injuries. Only Lu Jiang he's face was ruddy and quite healthy. Although he had reconstructed his body before, the number of people who died in the inheritance war was too small. It was not enough for him to return to his peak. In this war between the righteous and demonic factions, there were too many people participating in the war. The martial artists on both sides added up to more than 100,000. The last war was even more bloody. Almost everyone in the True Fire spiritual cultivation realm was injured, and several people in the real pellet state had fallen. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Lu Jiang he absorbed the vitality in the battlefield. It could be said that he was getting stronger and stronger. He took this opportunity to restore to his peak state. Of course, it was useless. Lu Jiang he's peak state was only at the peak of the True Fire spiritual cultivation realm. At that time, he was still shouting like a retard on the battlefield that Blood-Sea Demon, was finally back. As a result, in the blink of an eye, he was besieged by Yun Mengzi of Chunyang Dao Sect, Han Jusi of True Martial Cult, Helian Changfeng of White Tiger Hall, and 2 True Fire spiritual cultivation realm masters of Eastern Qi Royal Family Hall. Although he always shouted that he was Blood-Sea Demon, he was not the real 4 demon seniors after all, so he couldn't affect the overall situation of the war. Mei Qinglian glanced at him and said, "You have confidence in Chu Xiu." Lu Jiang he laughed twice and didn't speak. He didn't have confidence in Chu Xiu, but he had confidence in Dugu Weiwei. Dugu Weiwei and the sect leader were very entangled. In any case, no matter what the reason was, he didn't believe that Chu Xiu would lose so easily. Therefore, he was very confident that when Chu Xiu returned, it would be the time to turn the situation around. Of course, to be more realistic, he had to think of a way to block the current attack first. His eyes rolled. Lu Jiang he suddenly said to Mei Qinglian, "You are the descendant of the Darkness Demon sect, right?" Mei Qinglian was surprised and said, "Yes, why?" Everyone knew her identity. Why did Lu Jiang he suddenly mention this? Lu Jiang he touched his chin and said, "To be honest, I don't like people of your sect. In the Saint sect, your Darkness Demon sect's ancestor was very gossipy, and always liked to talk bad about me. But now we are all on the same side, so I will give you something good." Under Mei Qinglian's puzzled gaze, Lu Jiang he imprinted something on a blank jade slip, and threw it to Mei Qinglian. After receiving it, Mei Qinglian asked curiously, "What is this?" Lu Jiang he chuckled and said, "Of course it's something good. It's some of Red Lotus Demon Venerable's insights on the heart-refining art of the Red Lotus Fire. It's not a cultivation technique, but it's more useful than a cultivation technique. In the past, your Yin Demon sect's ancestor worshipped the Red Lotus Demon Venerable the most. He followed behind the Red Lotus Demon Venerable every day, and even wanted to become his disciple. The Yin Demon sect's immortal maiden great art was able to bring disaster to the gods' hearts. It would bring disaster to others, and it would also cause chaos to others. The karmic fire of the Red Lotus refines oneself first, then others. The two have the same effect. But it's obvious that the karmic fire of the Red Lotus is a level higher than your beauty demon sects. You know Li Jiaodi. She obtained some of Red Lotus Demon Venerable's cultivation technique, and cultivated the karmic fire of the red lotus, but it's not. If you can comprehend something with this insight, even if you can't cultivate the karmic fire of the red lotus, it can still bring your beauty demon technique to the next level. You are still one step away from refining your spirit with true fire, but if you can use the karmic fire to refine your heart, you might be able to take this opportunity to reach the next level. First the heart, then the spirit. Before Mei Qinglian could calm down, Lu Jianghe turned his gaze to Lu Fengxian and said, "You're cultivating the 9 heavens fiend golden body of the ancient demonic god Lu Wenhou. That brat Chu Xiu is also cultivating this cultivation technique. Lu Wenhou's strength can be said to be the #1 battle general since ancient times, so in terms of cultivation technique, you have no flaws. Furthermore, although you have great luck, your foundation is solid. Breaking through to the true fire spirit refinement realm is only a matter of time. If you want to improve as soon as possible, you can only think of a way through experience." This is the insight left behind by Demon Venerable Zhan Wu. He was the #1 battle general of my holy sect. Even if he can't compare to the legendary Lu Wenhou, he still has his merits. This body refining insight is to use battle to nurture battle. The battlefield of the righteous and demonic factions will be a place for you to temper your body. Only in desperate situations can you have a big breakthrough. After throwing another jade slip to Lu Fengxian, Lu Jianghe did not wait for him to speak. He turned his gaze to Ren Qianxiu of the Phaseless Demon Sect, and threw him a jade slip as well. "I have some friendship with the ancestor of your Phaseless Demon Sect, and we even discussed the martial Tao, demonic formless, mystical arts without spirit. The martial Tao of your Phaseless Demon Sect should be between the 3 branches of Tao, Buddha, and Demon. However, when I saw you on the battlefield, the martial Tao of your Phaseless Demon Sect seems to have a gap and has lost the charm of the Tao. The things in here should be able to help your cultivation further." Seeing that Lu Jianghe threw out so many good things in one breath, everyone present couldn't react. After a long while, everyone remembered that Lu Jianghe, he was not just a hall master of the Blood Demon Hall. He was a living fossil who had personally experienced the peak of the Kunlun Devil cult. When the Kunlun Devil cult was destroyed, whether it was the direct descendants of the Kunlun Devil cult or branches like the Phaseless Demon Sect, their inheritance was almost broken. As Lu Jianghe, who was from the same generation as their ancestor, he could be said to be a living fossil. As long as he casually revealed something from his mouth, it would be of great benefit to the current inheritors of the Kunlun Devil cult. After a long while, Mei Qinglian asked, "Why didn't you take these things out before?" Lu Jianghe spread out his hands and asked, "Why should I take them out?" Everyone present was stunned for a moment, but then they laughed bitterly and didn't say anything. Previously, they felt that Lu Jianghe was a little eccentric. To be precise, he had been eccentric since 500 years ago. However, now it seemed that he was able to sit in the position of Hall Master of the Blood Demon Hall 500 years ago, and become a subordinate of the Kunlun Devil cult, second only to the 4 great demon lords. How could he be an idiot? Lu Jianghe didn't do this for Wei Shuya. He could wholeheartedly treat Chu Xiu as an inheritor and hand everything over to Chu Xiu. He was very clear about his position. To be precise, he helped Chu Xiu in exchange for benefits. Chu Xiu hadn't reached the level of Dugu Weiwei, so he wasn't qualified for Lu Jianghe to wholeheartedly serve him. Today, he took out these things because the situation was really critical. Even if he didn't care about Chu Xiu, he had to do his best on the side of the devil path. Chapter 1022. The situation in the subduing martial hall had reached a critical point. Even though Lu Jianghe had brought out so many good items, it was useless. Martial arts could not be mastered in a short period of time. Even if they comprehended it now, it was impossible for them to jump to the true fire spirit refinement realm. At this moment, someone suddenly came in to report that Situchi and the others had come to visit. Everyone present frowned. No one thought that Situchi and the others had come for a good thing. Everyone knew about the enmity between Situchi and Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu had attacked them more than once or twice. Now that Chu Xiu was in danger, Situchi and the others should be thankful that they did not hit him when he was down. They did not think that they were here to help. Although they belonged to the lurking devil clan, they did not think that they would let go of their enmity for the sake of the entire lurking devil clan. Compared to them, even the sects of the bright devil clan from the moon-worshipping cult were more reliable. Before Wei Shuya could say whether or not he would see them, a shout came from outside. Situchi and the others had barged in. There were a total of 5 true fire spirit refinement realm martial artists who had come in, besides Situchi and Kuanemo. The other 3 were the ones who had escaped from the primitive devil cave in the past. They were the 3 big shots of the devil path 800 years ago. No one knew how they had gotten together. Looking at them, Wei Shuya frowned and asked, Situchi, what are you doing here? Situchi smiled and said, Elder Wei, don't be angry. I'm here to help. I've heard about your situation. It's not looking good. We're all from the lurking devil clan. How can we sit back and do nothing? Although Senior Siwuya is a cultivator from 800 years ago and has nothing to do with the Kunlun devil cult, they're still from the fiend path. They're willing to help at a time like this. Wei Shuya said indifferently, Don't say such high-sounding words. Do you really have such good intentions? Before Situchi could speak, Siwuya, the former Grand Elder of the Ghost King sect, said, The righteous path and the fiend path are irreconcilable. We're all from the fiend path. Is it wrong for us to help them? Of course, there's a small condition for us to help them. Now my devil path lineage is divided into bright devil and hidden devil lineage. Even the hidden devil lineage is fighting their own battles. This is not good. That's why I want to emulate the system from 800 years ago and establish the alliance of the demonic path. Whether it's an individual or a sect, everyone can join. Naturally, everyone can also join. Wei Shuya will give you a position as an alliance elder. Everyone's expressions darkened when they heard this. These fellows weren't here to add insult to injury. They were here to loot a burning house. The hidden devil clan itself was an alliance. Why would they need an alliance? But who was in charge of the Inma clan now? On the surface, there was no one in charge of the Inma clan, but in reality, the one who occupied the majority of the Inma clan's power was Chu Xiu. He could now be considered the true leader of the Inma clan. Si Wuya and the others wanted to form an alliance of the fiend path. They were clearly trying to dig out the roots of the lurking devil progeny. Wei Shuya looked at Situchi and said coldly, Situchi, don't forget that your clan used to be from the holy sect. What's the foundation of the hidden devil clan? We're the heirs of the holy sect. We established the hidden devil clan with the holy sect's heritage as our foundation. By helping them establish the alliance of the fiend path, you're digging up the hidden devil clan's roots and the holy sect's roots. How can you face your ancestors if you do this? Before Situchi could reply, Siwuya said, What do you mean by the holy sect? That was 500 years ago. The Kunlun devil cult has been gone for so long. What's the point of carrying its name? You have to look forward. In terms of seniority, we're all older than your so-called holy sect. Lu Jiang, he suddenly sneered. He stood up and pointed a finger at Siwuya's nose as he spat. F***ck. You. Mother Ker. Siwuya and the others were stunned. They did not expect Lu Jianghe would insult him in front of so many people and use such vulgar language. They were experts in the true fire spirit refinement realm. Whether it was now or 800 years ago, whether it was on the noble path or the fiend path, they were people of high status. Even if they had a deep grudge against each other, they would not curse each other the moment they met. Siwuya pointed a finger at Lu Jianghe. He was so angry that his hands were shaking. Preposterous. Preposterous. Lu Jianghe spat on the ground. He sneered disdainfully and said, A bunch of wretches. When the sect master founded the holy sect, you idiots were like this. You won't shed a tear until you see your coffin. You'll only kneel and beg the sect master to spare your lives. The holy sect will last for 10,000 years. 10,000 years ago, if the holy sect did not exist, the fiend path did not have an orthodox lineage. However, ever since the holy sect was founded, 10,000 years later, even if the holy sect is no more, the fiend path is still the orthodox lineage. How dare trash like you come and dig at the foundation of the holy sect? Do you have a death wish? As soon as Lu Jianghe finished speaking, the murderous aura around him surged into the sky. A rhythm resounded in the great hall. It was the sound of blood flowing. The expressions of Si Wuya and the others changed. In the end, they did not make a move. They merely waved their sleeves and left. One of them scoffed and said, "Very well. Since you're so stubborn, I'd like to see if your holy sect can still save you when you're cornered by the noble path." After that, Si Wuya and the others left with their tails between their legs. They were here to loot a burning house, not to fight to the death with Lu Jianghe and the others. The expressions of the others darkened. Clearly, they were disgusted. Situchi and the others had completely shed all pretense of cordiality with the lurking devil progeny. They did not even want to think about saving face anymore. However, the lurking devil progeny still had powerful enemies with them. It would not be appropriate for them to attack them. At this moment, everyone looked at Lu Jianghe in surprise. They did not expect Lu Jianghe to have such a domineering side to him. All this while, they did not have much respect for the hall master of the Blood Devil Hall 500 years ago. Naturally, with Lu Jianghe's silly appearance, they could not bring themselves to respect him. However, today he was domineering for once. He finally felt like an overlord of the fiend path. When Lu Jianghe saw the gazes on him, he could not help but smile wickedly. "If the heaven-devouring tiger doesn't show its might, do you really think I'm a garden cat?" However, his smile completely dissipated the imposing manner from before. The crowd could not help but shake their heads. Well, Lu Jianghe is still the same Lu Jianghe. The crowd did not have time to waste. Almost all of them were injured, so they had to make the best use of their time to recover from their injuries and deal with the next attack. At this moment, in the middle of Shangmeng Mountain, there was a large number of camps. They were all people from the major factions. Some of them were rogue cultivators. In order to fight for fame and profit, they also joined the team to kill the fiends. Yunmingzi and Han Jusi stood at the forefront. As the people who were driving this operation, the two of them could be said to be the leaders of the righteous path sections. When they gave orders, they were even more in the limelight than Ling Yunzi and Lu Chonglu. It was fortunate that Ling Yunzi and Lu Chonglu were not narrow-minded people. Otherwise, they would have to fight amongst themselves before they could settle the matter. Looking at the surrounding scene, Yunmingzi suddenly sighed and said, "Brother Han, do you remember the battle 800 years ago when our Tao sect joined forces to expel the Buddhism from the Central Plains? At that time, it was also the same scene. Even at that time, the diabolism could only order us around. I did not expect that now. It is our turn to regard the diabolism as a great enemy. 800 years ago, the Jianghu was in chaos. The temples and the Jianghu were in endless war. And it was even more chaotic than now. At present, the two most powerful Buddhist sects were in the north. The Great Light Temple was in the north, which was a bitter and cold land 800 years ago. And the Sabodhi Zen Monastery was in the southern barbarian land. Until now, it was still a desolate place. At that time, the Central Plains naturally had the Buddhism. However, at that time, the Buddhism was expelled from the Central Plains by the Tao sect. At that time, the diabolism was still in a state of disunity. The Kunlun devil cult did not appear. Everyone fought on their own. It could be said that they were the weakest among all the forces in the world. Han Jusi said in a low voice, "Now the diabolism is indeed strong. The moon-worshipping cult of Western Chu used to be a small sect in the Miao territory. I did not expect it to grow into a giant. There is also the Inma clan. I heard that they are only the remnants of the Kunlun devil cult. But the remnants are already so powerful. It is hard to imagine how strong the Kunlun devil cult was in the past. In short, we must be careful. The next time we attack, we will strive to completely defeat the other party. Then, we will inform the Eastern Qi Imperial Court to send troops to attack the Northern Yan from the gap we have torn open. We will leave the matter of seizing cities to them." 800 years ago, this was a trick that Han Jusi and the others often used. The Jianghu forces were responsible for defeating the other party's high-end forces. Then the Imperial Court's army would come to clean up the mess. This time, they wanted to do the same, but they did not expect that the resistance they encountered would be so tenacious. Although the other party was defeated, They did not collapse. Yin Mingzi looked at the small forces and the other martial artists and snorted coldly. My Chunyang Dao sect may be declining in this era, but our disciples are still capable. There are no cowards who are afraid of death. But these guys are too hateful. They only know how to fight when the wind blows. They can't hold on after suffering a setback. They are defeated before the other party is defeated. If it were not for them, we could have completely eliminated the Inma clan last time. Han Jisi shook his head. Everyone in the world comes for benefits. This group of people came for benefits. How can you expect them to put their lives on the line? But it does not matter. As long as they can make a move, it will be fine. Right, have you sent someone to inform Sword King City that they have returned? Yin Mingzi's expression was slightly gloomy. They have returned, but Sword King City's attitude is unclear. It seems that Jin Chanfeng has no way to deal with his juniors. They don't even have the right to express their opinions. Han Jisi waved his hand. Forget it, let's not wait for them. We have enough strength here. This time we must completely defeat the Inma clan. Chapter 1023. At the border between Shangmang Mountain and Eastern Qi, tens of thousands of martial artists' gangqis flashed, and a strange phenomenon appeared. Sensing that the righteous martial artists had already made their move, Wei Shuya and the others did not care whether their injuries had healed or not, and immediately rushed forward to meet them. Shang Tianliang's face was a little pale. He snorted coldly and said, Chu Xiu is too scheming. Guarding against I is like guarding against a thief. If he was at ease and let I bring out all the people in Shang City, they would definitely be a great force to be reckoned with after cultivating in the outside world for a while. This time, Shang Tianliang had also attacked with all his strength, but he was still no match for Ling Yunzi, who was wielding the pure yang divine weapon. Wei Shuya did not say anything. He sighed and said, City Lord Shang, if we really can't hold them off, you take your men and retreat first. I will cover their retreat. The surrounding people wanted to say something, but Wei Shuya shook his head and said, There is no need to say anything more. This old man does not have many years left to live, but you are different. As long as the green hills last, there is hope. As long as there are people, the lineage of Inmo will never end. Wei Shuya was very open-minded about matters of life and death. In the past, 4 of the 5 sky demons of 9 Sky Mountain had died. His 4 brothers had allowed him to live for only one reason: to leave a seed for 9 Sky Mountain. Now Wei Shuya had the same idea. Mei Qinglian, Lu Fengxian, and the others were all seeds of the demonic lineage, and Chu Xiu was even more so. As long as they could live, he had nothing to fear even if he had to risk his life. There was great terror between life and death, and he had already seen through this terror 100 years ago. Mei Qinglian and the others wanted to say something, but Wei Shuya pointed to the front. Yin Mingzi, Han Jusi, and the others had already led a large group of righteous martial artists to attack them. Both sides were already in a situation where they would not rest until one side was dead. Yin Mingzi and the others knew that the demonic lineage would not surrender. Similarly, Wei Shuya and the others also knew that the righteous lineage would not retreat. So there was no need for words, and they would just attack. Ling Yunzi wielded the pure Yang Dao sword and attacked Shang Tianliang. The pure sun divine armament shone brightly, and there was even a rhythm that affected the surrounding laws of power. That was the mark of Ancestor Lu on the pure Yang divine weapon. Ling Yunzi had obtained the secret art from Yun Mingzi, and he could finally unleash the full power of the pure Yang divine weapon. Ling Yunzi shook his head and said, I can tell that you're not a member of the demonic path. Since that's the case, why do you insist on helping Chu Xiu to the end? Shang Tianliang snorted. In fact, at the very beginning, he had only served Chu Xiu because he wanted Chu Xiu to bring out all the people from the mall. After witnessing Chu Xiu's strength and power, Shang Tianliang had other thoughts. Shang City's people suddenly appeared in Jianghu. Tao was not Tao, Buddha was not Buddha, and devil was not devil. They definitely had to choose a faction to support. The person he chose was Chu Xiu. He believed that with Chu Xiu's potential, he would go further in the future, and even reach a realm that even he couldn't imagine. Now he was fighting to the death with the righteous path for the sake of the Inma lineage, not only for Chu Xiu, but also for himself. When Ling Yunzi saw Shang Tianyang's attitude, he didn't try to persuade him anymore. The pure Yang Dao sword bloomed with extreme pure Yang light. In an instant, everyone seemed to see a second sun. At the border of the righteous and demonic battlefields, there were dozens of sword-wielding warriors standing there. They were the people of Sword King City. Sword King City had been invited by Han Jusi and the others to annihilate the demons, but they didn't take action in the end. Strictly speaking, Sword King City wasn't a righteous sect. In fact, the immoral things they had done in the western regions were even worse than those of the demonic path. Therefore, Sword King City didn't seem to care about the demonic path's actions this time. However, this battle between the righteous path and the demonic path would affect the development of the martial arts world in the Central Plains. Even if Sword King City wasn't prepared to take action, they had to come and watch. At that moment, on Sword King City's side, a tall and thin sword-wielding warrior with a mustache snorted. "I've already said it before. Stand on the side of the righteous path and kill the demonic path. This will definitely be of great help to Sword King City's power. I'm very familiar with Yin Mingzi and Han Jusi. They are both outstanding figures of the Dao sect 800 years ago. Now that they have joined forces, there's no reason for them to lose. It's such a big matter, and we, Sword King City, are only spectators. It's such a waste." The person who spoke was called Jin Chanfeng. He was one of the warriors from 800 years ago, and one of Sword King City's elders. However, compared to Han Jusi and the others who could control part of the sect, Jin Chanfeng was much more unlucky. None of the three from Sword King City were easy to deal with. Heavenly King Shen was domineering and dictatorial. Ming Yanghe was extreme and gloomy. Apart from Heavenly King Shen, he wouldn't listen to anyone. Du Guli was a warrior of the older generation, and a member of the former royal family. He had a fiery temper. Sometimes, when his temper flared up, he even dared to scold Heavenly King Shen. Given the personalities of these three, it would be wishful thinking for Jin Chanfeng to seize power from them. When the righteous path had invited them to take action, Jin Chanfeng had wanted to agree. However, he had been rejected by Heavenly King Shen and the other two. To Heavenly King Shen and the others, true fire spirit refinement realm cultivators were indeed something they needed. It should be said that all large sects needed them. However, what they needed were obedient true fire spirit refinement realm cultivators who were on their side, not people who stirred up trouble from the sidelines. What did their ancestors from 800 years ago have to do with them? If they were dead, they would respectfully pay their respects. If they were alive, it was not like 800 years ago anymore. If they followed the rules, they were still a member of Sword King City. If they did not follow the rules, they would be considered traitors. Who knew? They might even want to punish them. At that moment, no one cared about what Jin Chanfeng and the others had said. Du Guli turned to Feng Qixiao and asked, "Seventh young master, who do you think will win?" Feng Qixiao stood stiffly in front of the big shots of the sects, looking rather serious. Although he was an unreliable person, he still knew how to read people's expressions. If he dared to say anything inappropriate now, he would probably die a horrible death when he returned to Sword King City. Upon hearing that, Feng Qixiao did not even think about it. He only said in a low voice, "I don't know who will win, but I know that the hidden demons will definitely not lose." Heavenly King Shen was surprised. "Why? Just because of Chu Xiu? You think so highly of Chu Xiu?" Feng Qixiao nodded. "It really is because of Chu Xiu. If Chu Xiu dies, I dare say that the hidden demons will definitely lose. But if Chu Xiu is still alive, even if he is the only one left in the entire hidden demons, he will still be able to make a comeback." Jin Chanfeng could not help but snort. 800 years ago, there were countless amazing talents in the pugilistic world, but what happened in the end? Human strength cannot defeat the heavens. There are many heroes in every era of the pugilistic world, but how many of them can survive until the end? What right does Chu Xiu have to do that? Feng Qixiao glanced at him and said lightly, "Because Chu Xiu is the first person I dare not say I can surpass." Heavenly King Shen could not help but be surprised when he heard Feng Qixiao's words. Although Feng Qixiao was usually unruly, and even gave Heavenly King Shen headaches, They knew how talented Fang Qixiao was. Under that unruly appearance, he was very proud. Before Chu Xiu became famous, Fang Qixiao had fought with both Zhongxian and Zhang Qingzhen, but he had lost. But even if he had lost, Fang Qixiao had never been convinced by his opponents. He had never thought that he was weaker than Zhongxian and Zhang Qingzhen. Life was only a few hundred years. If he could not enjoy himself, then what was the point of living? Swordsmanship was his passion. Drinking and visiting brothels were also his passions. If Fang Qixiao could spend all his time cultivating swordsmanship, with his talent, he would definitely become a powerful swordsman like Qiu Tianya and Kong Dongming in the future. But everyone had their own way of living. Fang Qixiao did not want to live like Zhang Qingzhen and Zhongxian. It was not that he did not care about cultivation. It was just that there were too many interesting things in the world. He did not want to let them go. Heavenly King Shen was very clear about Fang Qixiao's thoughts. That was why he was surprised to see Fang Qixiao praise Chu Xiu so much. Fang Qixiao's words proved that, in his opinion, even if he was a swordsman and cultivated crazily every day, he would still not be able to catch up to Chu Xiu. At that moment, Fang Qixiao suddenly said, "Of course, this is only in terms of strength. In terms of looks, other than brother Lu Fengxian, I've never been afraid of anyone. Other than the sword in my hand, I also rely on my face to make a living. The last time I went to the Floral Moon House, those girls were shocked by my handsomeness and elegance. They did not even have the nerve to ask for money. I was already one street away, but they were still chasing after me." Heavenly King Shen's face immediately darkened. "Drag him away." Bai Qian, who was following behind Heavenly King Shen, shook his head. He covered Fang Qixiao's mouth and dragged him to the back, not letting him express his proud words. It was Jin Chongfeng's first time seeing Fang Qixiao like this. He could not help but be stunned. He said to Heavenly King Shen, "Is this the future successor of Sword King City?" Although Heavenly King Shen felt embarrassed, he still snorted coldly and said, "Why? Are you not convinced? When Fang Qixiao reaches the true fire spirit refinement stage, you can fight him. If you can win, I will give you the position of Sword King City's sect leader." Jin Chongfeng shook his head. He really believed it. The reason was simple. Based on Fang Qixiao's behavior, if his talent in Sword Dao was really not good, he would probably have been hung up on Sword King City's banner long ago. Meanwhile, on the battlefield between the Orthodox and Demon sects, although Fang Qixiao thought highly of Chu Xiu, the hidden demons were already on the verge of collapsing before Chu Xiu even appeared. In the previous battle, almost everyone from the hidden demons' side was injured. This time the Orthodox sects had made another move. Under the pressure, the hidden demons were already in a precarious situation. You're tuning into the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.